With y bwrdd y corff llywodraethol iechyd prifysgol 2 Abertawe. Croeso cynnes i cyfarfod y bwrdd fer yma, a croeso mawr i'r sylwedyddion fer yma. Mark Thomas a Hugh Bennett James Chest, Catherine Morgan Edwards and Paul, Helen Williams and Llais Ardlin. Croeso mawr i chi. So I'm John Williams, the chair of the board of Swansea Bay University Health Board, which is the governing body of the organisation. Very warm welcome to all our board members and to our guests and observers this morning. We have Mark Thomas and Hugh Bennett from Morgan Flat. Very warm welcome. We have James Chess and Catherine Morgan Edwards, who are part of the Health Board and come from the digital item. And then Helen Williams from Llais. A very warm welcome, Helen. Lovely to see you. And then we have Rina Owen, our board member, online as well. So I just make a very short introduction in terms of the role and responsibilities of the board as the governing body. It is, of course, a strategic population health body with a statutory duty around health protection and public health. Now, as the governing body, the board is the highest level of decision making in the organisation, and the decisions shape the organisation for years to come. So the board has to keep future focused and look at setting strategic direction. That's a really important role. And our agenda today has some really important items around that, including our 2025 to 28 integrated medium-term plan, and with particular reference to our 2025-26 annual plan. This is a significant piece of work, as you appreciate, and the board has had a little time to consider early drafts. We are going to start the process early into next year, as Abby will describe, as we've got our full complement of executive directors. But for those who look in on the board, we can take it that the board has seen earlier drafts and has read all the papers, as the board does for all the agenda items. We are also taking our digital strategy, which of course that is the future in terms of digitalisation as we move from analog to digital. And we've got our two colleagues who are going to give us a story associated with that. And we're also looking at our regional pathology network and how that is going to be organised for the future. The board has to build and sustain strategic partnerships, and our agendas always include different elements of partnership working. We're taking an update on our regional joint committee with Hywel Dda this morning, and of course the plan, our IMTP, has a section on partnership working. And we move then from setting strategic direction to setting the strategic risks and the oversight of the strategic risks for the organisation. It's the board's role to set the strategic risk appetite and then to ensure that the board has a line of sight to all the strategic risks and how they map across in year and into our future thinking. And we're going to take this item now quite early on in the agenda so that everybody has all the strategic risks in mind when we come on to the later agenda item. The board is also responsible for delivery against the in-year plan, the here and now, the oversight scrutiny role. And we're very much at the end of the financial year now, so we're looking at delivery against performance and finances. We also see as well as a change to the report this month, and this is under development and redesign, escalation and oversight report, and things will change and develop as the year goes on. Cancer services, very, very important part of our service planning and delivery. We're taking a specific item on cancer services today, in addition to it being part of the plan, because Audit Wales produced a report at national level on cancer services earlier in the year. Welsh Government has just responded to that report. It will have implications for us. So we'll hear a little bit about that when we take the piece on cancer services. The board has to maintain good governance across all its domains, because whatever goes wrong because of some form of governance failure, whether that's clinical, corporate, financial, information, you name it, failures will have governance at the bottom. So we've got a number of items on the agenda today. in respect of government, including our residents. We're taking 2 different reports on maternity and neonatal services, and we're going to welcome back Denise Clapper and Ken Sutton from the Independent Review Oversight. Throughout the meeting, we take update reports from our board committees and our advisory groups. And today we're also going to look at our board engagement strategy. And this is all about ensuring that the board has line of sight from the board to the front line, whatever that front line comprises. So there is going to be a new board engagement programme for 25-26. And that's vital because with staff, with our service users, families, communities, our population more broadly, board has to set the tone and culture in which staff want to come to work with their best selves without fear of disadvantage or discrimination, and our patients and service users can come and use services that we would want for ourselves, our friends, and our family. So the board has a wide range of roles and responsibilities, as said, and I'm now delighted that we're turning to the agenda to start the meeting. So if I start with the apologies, Deb Lewis is represented by Craig Wilson this morning. Joanne Abbott-Davis is represented by Richard Thomas. Paul David is represented by Hazel Powell, all of whom send their apologies. We've had apologies from Judith Vincent and Jackie Davis, and Rena, our board member, as I've said, is there. So can I just ask colleagues, please, are there any declarations of interest relating to items on today's agenda not already recorded on the declaration of interest register? Julia.
In fact, for the Wales report in relation to council services at an all Wales level.
Thank you.
And just to declare, I was the interim chief commissioner for the JCC in the period just before I came to the industry exec, so was involved in the establishment of the new JCC. I'm now a board member, and those interests are declared routinely, but it's probably worth highlighting, Jan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll start then, Abby, with your report, please.
Thank you very much, Jan, and Foradar, everybody. There are a couple of things I wanted to highlight in the report, but I will take it as read in terms of the content of my report. What I use the report to do is just to flag a couple of key areas of focus that will come up on our agenda separately, but just to give direction to the board in relation to that. And also to bring to your attention other things that I think it's important for you to know about that don't come up anywhere else on the agenda. So thank you for the opportunity, Jan. So in terms of the specific issues that I wanted to flag, there are a number on the agenda this morning, and I'm just going to refer to my notes about the areas that I'm going to pick up. So in terms of the first item, in terms of leadership, and John, you talked about this in your introduction about leadership of the organisation. I'm just confirming where we are in terms of the leadership of the executive team, in terms of the makeup of the team. Really pleased to confirm, as you've heard before, that Liz Riggs, our new Executive Director of Nursing, starts on Monday, so not long to wait now at all. The Workforce Director, Tina Ricketts, will join us on the 1st of May. And I'm also pleased to confirm that Dr. Gillian Richardson will be joining us again next week in relation to starting as our Interim Director of Public Health. Colleagues will be aware that our substantive post holder, Keith Reid, remains on secondment into Welsh Government, and we are really lucky to have someone of Jill's experience wanting to come and work with us and join the board. All of those colleagues joined us on an away day with the executive team. What's been recent, I can't remember where it was now, where we were looking at the objectives for the team going forward and our individual objectives, which we are in the process of finalising. So really pleased to see those colleagues joining us. In relation to Hazel, this is Hazel's final week. She's on leave, so Paul and Leslie have been covering, so thank you to Paul and Leslie for doing that collectively between them. And just to put on record my thanks to Hazel for the work that she's done in the organisation, the support she's given me as she takes up her new post. Just a couple of other items, Jan, that I wanted to touch upon. Two relating to escalation. So colleagues will be aware, and board members have been briefed, that in respect of Welsh Government's escalation and intervention framework, colleagues will be aware that There are routine reviews during the course of the year that Welsh Government undertake at 6-monthly intervals. The last review took place in February, and we were notified on the outcome of that in March, with notification from the Cabinet Secretary that we have been de-escalated to 2 service areas to recognise the progress that we are making. So in relation to planned care and children and adult mental health services, adolescent mental health services, sorry, we have been moved from tier 4, which is targeted intervention, into tier 3, which is enhanced monitoring. So continued level of scrutiny in relation to those services, but we're going in the right direction in the progress that we are making. So my thanks on behalf of the board to everybody who's worked very hard in those service areas to ensure that we're making progress. And I know that when Craig talks about planned care, we're on countdown as we approach the end of year to ensure that all the people that we have committed to treating by the end of the year, we are doing so. In terms of urgent and emergent care, again, we'll touch upon this on our performance report, but we know that it's an area of continued pressure in the system, and you will be seeing that and hearing that and in terms of the work that you are doing in your roles. And just to say that there is a lot of good work taking place, and Craig will touch upon some of this. So we have introduced some new ways of working. So urgent primary care, picking up running home visiting pilot from Monday to Friday as part of our response out of hospital to prevent unnecessary admissions coming to our front door. And we have been working very closely with Andrew and local authority colleagues in relation to making sure that we've got the very best streamlined pathways to get patients back home following an acute episode of care, and that we assess in a timely way their needs for ongoing support or interim support or intermediate care support as they return to better health. So there's a lot of work in that arena. You will be aware that in the previous board meeting we have invited some colleagues who work in the shop floor and ED to come and share with us their experience. So 2 nursing colleagues joined us. That was hard to hear in terms of the pressure in the department, the physical environment in which we're providing care, which we know is very challenging. And just to say that in relation to both of those things, we are following up on the workforce issues that were raised. We have done, Hazel before she left, commissioned a baseline assessment of the nursing workforce, which we have had back, and we are doing further work on that. So Leslie is doing some work with the service group. Leslie happens to be an ED nurse by background and is going to spend some time in there to observe, because obviously the baseline numbers are one thing. What we've got in terms of rotas on the shifts, reflecting the acuity and the demand at any one time is another thing, and understanding that and making sure we've got the right workforce moving forward. And then there were some other specific issues. So security came up. When I went to do a visit last week, I had a good chat with the security guard who is there permanently now, and we've got greater presence there. We are making progress in terms of how we make sure patients who are delayed in the department waiting for their next level of care, that they are hydrated, they have access to food, they're supported to eat, and we're making sure that they're clean and comfortable. And again, when I was visiting, I heard the important role that our band 2s are doing in terms of being employed specifically to do that, and that is making a difference on the ward. So that is really helpful. We have already committed to bring a Windsor review and reflection report back in May. There is a Cabinet Secretary Summit on Monday to reflect on the winter and to think about things we need to have in place next winter, which will be upon us before we know. And in addition to our focus on winter, we'll bring a more comprehensive update on all the work we're doing in ED and the emergency and urgent care system, front door, back door, keeping people at home well, at our next board meeting. So we'll give you a more detailed update. The final update I wanted to share with board is colleagues will be aware that we have commissioned some independent board level advice in respect of our mental health and learning disability services. Melanie Walker has been appointed. She has an extensive experience of leading mental health and learning disability organisations in England, and she has done her initial assessment work with us. She commenced in January, and she gave us initial feedback in our in-committee session last month. And following on from that work, Melanie's continuing the assessment. She focused on the inpatient provision. She's looking at whole system in terms of community, and we will bring back an update report report in May, and we will be having a special purpose board meeting in June, where we will receive an update on the transformation programme. There are 3 areas of work that we're focusing on, and there are 3 timelines that we're working on. So we're looking at our service model, making sure we have a modern fit for purpose service model that we're delivering for our patients, which is informed by those with lived experience and those people who use our service and those staff who work in the service, and evidence of good practice from elsewhere that we can draw upon. We've also got the NHS executive looking at our inpatient services, and they will reporting imminently on that too. And so we are looking at immediate work around some of the estate and some of the actions we need to take, which we are progressing at pace. There are some interim arrangements that we will need to put in place, and we're just working through our options and proposals around that. We're also looking at some of the immediate workforce issues that we need to address. And then we'll be bringing forward at pace our longer term solution in terms of the service model and what infrastructure and estate we need in place to enable us to deliver that, and what's the right workforce for us to achieve that. John, I've covered a lot in that, so I will stop at that point and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Abby, for that comprehensive run through what is a very detailed report and designed to actually make sure that all members of the board and anybody reading the paper will get the wide range of issues that chief executive engages in, even if we don't discuss them all in the actual meeting. So thank you, Jill. So Nicola, please come in.
Chair, thank you, Abby, for a very comprehensive report. I just wanted to welcome the engagement work with the ED department. Fantastic to see, obviously, the last 2 months, there's been a lot of effort and back on the team, which is brilliant, thank you. I just wanted to have a little bit of information as to how the staff morale is at the moment in the department.
That's a really good question. If I look to perhaps Paul and Craig, who will probably be closer to it from an operational point of view. One thing I will say, Nicola, is that I get to see some of the complaints that come through, and making sure we're listening to patients as well about their experience is an important thing. But 2 things before I invite Craig and Paul to comment. We know that some colleagues have been talking to the Royal College, so I met with Helen, whose surname escapes me at the moment, thank you, in the last month to talk to her about the feedback she is getting directly from the nursing staff. We've had correspondence from HIW and from the Royal College of Nursing and Midwifery that we have responded to. So I think that is indicating that there are still issues in terms of making sure our staff are supported, feel safe on the wards, are getting the support they need on busy shifts. And that is work in progress, but perhaps if I can invite Paul and Craig to comment.
Yeah, I'll start, if that's okay. Challenging is the word I would use to describe. There's a difficult scenario around all the activity within ED that they manage on a day-to-day basis, and you know that's well accepted at every level, the board here especially. But they are appreciative of the communication, and they know the support that has gone in and will be going in order to listen to and address their concerns, which is really important. And the fact that it's been mentioned around my colleague Leslie Jenkins, who has a background in ED, there's also a confidence there that they have an individual who actually understands their work practices as well. Because you could send somebody totally unrelated in that doesn't understand the work of an ED nurse and an ED department. Now, she's one person, she will involve others within things that she finds and interactions that she makes. But there is a positivity with the staff that they see progress, they see intervention being made, which they welcomed. And they've been very cooperative, very supportive, very directive in wanting to work with us in order to, for the benefit of patients ultimately, but also for the benefit of themselves and colleagues at what has been a very challenging time.
Craig, do you want to answer that?
Just to add, I think when the staff presented to the board, it's obvious they've got a difficult working environment, so I think they're welcoming the proposed capital development that we're taking forward in terms of creating additional working space around the emergency department. So that's been very well received. And obviously, the team's obviously listening to the concerns that
you like to come in?
Yeah, just reflecting on the clinically optimised patients. I mean, it's such a critical regional issue that's having a massive impact both on the access to secondary care and the quality of that really for patients. It's great to see the additional work streams have been put in place with the internal standards, the pilot, and then the work regionally. I'm really hoping we start to get traction because we've been on an upward trajectory since August. Is there plans in place to sort of increase the pace of that or the urgency of that work regionally, working with regional partners moving forward in case we're not seeing traction with it?
Yeah, happy, and others may want to comment. So there is fair amount of pace in there, Pat, in terms of the work. So we had a summit with the chief execs. There was a really good workshop in the last couple of weeks where lots of colleagues come together right across our partnership. The RPB is really getting behind this work. And into the kind of criticism about have we got a single version of the truth in terms of the data, a huge amount of work's been done to look at that to make sure that we are really clear which patients, why they're delayed, how we can ensure they're moving through the system. And my understanding, and I know Marie's been involved in Craig and Andrew, but my understanding is that we are now seeing the benefit of the improved focus and support in terms of getting patients to the next phase of their work. And my understanding is that the latest data show a marked improvement. Now, I think that's going through validation, but I could definitely see green shoots in terms of moving in the right direction and a commitment together to make sure patients are in the right place for their needs and their support at the time and that they're not delayed in an inappropriate environment in terms of their care needs and support that actually potentially may be worse for individuals in terms of risk to harm and deterioration. So I think we're making good progress. Perhaps Andrew or Marie or Craig might want to comment.
Yeah, yes, Chair, if I can just sort of follow up, following the workshop that was held last week, there's been a subsequent discussion with local authority colleagues and health board staff about taking some of the learning that was shared in that workshop and having what we called another main event, which is sort of a multi-agency discharge event leading up to Easter. So we're looking to put that in place from April the 11th so we can maximise the discharges before Easter. All parties have signed up to taking that forward.
Andrew, did you want to comment on
Yes,
on
yeah,
that?
if you don't mind, Chair. So yeah, I agree with all of those comments. I think there's some real progress being made. Thanks very much to Abby for giving it some more impetus. I think when you came in, Abby, with that getting the chief execs together, I think partners are now working very closely together. There is now a clear view of the task, so the numbers are clear. We all agree on those, and I think that's no small thing because we've been discussing that for some time. That's enabled us to start to move forward and focus on particular areas. So my understanding is that the figures have improved as well. Still need to improve further, but we are looking at this in a multifaceted, multidisciplinary approach, and I think we are getting some traction now, which is really good to hear.
You want to add?
Yeah. Just to echo what Andrew's just said, there is a really close working relationship now that is. So there's a frequent touch point at director level with ops planning, directors of social services colleagues, which is then translating down to the next level in terms of, okay, so what are we going to do differently? We have got quite a long way to go. We know that. The ambition is there, and we are just moving into the space now where we are organising ourselves collaboratively to look at how do we strengthen the way that we work in partnership, particularly in terms of the whole unscheduled care pathway across the system, to give the RPB a bigger role and oversight of how collectively we can strengthen some of those processes out of hospital. So I think, yeah, huge opportunity, but yeah, green shoots at the moment.
That's really good to hear. And of course, we'll have that reflected in the report coming back to the May board on our everything reflections, winter, etc. So that's great. Thank you. I've got Nuria, then Nuria.
Abby, thank you very much for your report. It's very detailed, and I wanted to pick up two areas of assurance. One is around the eye care service health needs assessment, which I was delighted to read about, and it's assurance around embracing a quality impact assessment approach as part of that eye care needs. The other area of assurance is notably on escalation. We're delighted that we've been de-escalated, but it's about sustaining and keeping that pace and making sure that we don't escalate again. So in particular, I'll welcome assurances around towns where we've seen a dip in terms of timelessness indicator.
Thank you, Nuria. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we're still in enhanced monitoring, so it's not as if we've been de-escalated in relation to those services down to routine monitoring. So as part of that process, we will continue to have the scrutiny on delivery of those services. Craig, you might want to comment.
Yeah,
I mean, it'll come up in
sorry.
the performance report, won't it? But you might want to.
If I pick up CAMS at this point, so yes, we as you noted, we did see a deterioration. As you appreciate and has been reported previously, we're heavily reliant on agency staff at the moment supporting the service. There was an expected lengthy leave period for some of those staff, and we didn't therefore see the dip. And I'm pleased to tell you that that's now back up to 75% in terms of Part 1A of the measure. So we have seen a recovery. So obviously in terms of sustainability, it's obviously moving from that situation where we're so heavily reliant on agency staff to move towards that substantive staffing base for the service. So do you want me to pick up the I-needs assessment of it as well? Because obviously that has been undertaken by the primary care team. It's a requirement for us. Just in terms of reassurance, what the I care needs assessment describes is the provision for optometry and enhanced optometry services across the health board. It does pick up some of the areas where we do need to do more. So it'll help us in terms of that part of the plan focus on certain areas within the health boards that don't have the same level of access to some of the enhanced services that our optometry colleagues can provide. So it's been it's really helpful from that perspective. And we had a visit from the Chief Optometric Officer, David O'Sullivan, this week. And we were able to share that information with him, and he can see the progress that we're making as an organisation in terms of eye care, both from a primary and secondary care perspective.
Dean, do you want to come back on that?
If I could just ask a question about eye care, Craig, because we know we've had difficulties across Wales in terms of provision of services, etc. But on that particular exercise, has that been digitised across Wales, and can we access those?
So so there's an ongoing issue regarding the digitisation of the images or the system to provide that transfer between primary and secondary care, which is of particular importance around conditions such as glaucoma, and will allow that allow further work to be undertaken by the optometrists. System of choice is a system called Open Eyes, which is in use in Cardiff. That had been handed over to DHCW to actually take that forward, but now a decision has been made to actually, and Matt might want to come on this, to actually work regionally to roll out that system. So we will be working with Hywel Dda and colleagues in Cardiff to look at how we roll that out, because we work particularly in the area of glaucoma. We provide a lot of support into Hywel Dda. So whatever we do, we need to do on a regional basis. But there does seem to be some progress. This is a system that's been in development probably over at least the last 10 years, and it's been very frustrating that we haven't had the traction that we needed to, but we seem to be nearing a point where this will be delivered.
So who picks up the cost for that?
And that's a very good point. We haven't worked through yet in terms of what the implications are in terms of implementation. We did initially have funding for staff for that implementation. So I don't, Matt, you might want to comment on that.
So I think maybe Jean, you're alluding to as well, the cost of all the delay that we've had. Yeah, so that's a very important question, isn't it? I think wider with all of the national issues and delays that we have in the whole model that we're all involved in, the governance model has let us down. And you're aware that there's been a review on the governance model nationally, and there are 16 recommendations that should happen this year to strengthen that. And we would hope that is going to make a difference to how we work together. Specifically on the Organise, we are waiting for a Welsh Government direction right now, and I spoke to a Welsh Government colleague just yesterday on when we can expect that way forward. We're ready to go with the project. The issue is we'll only get a 2-year contract with the Cardiff model. We need the DCW model in place to ensure we've got more than 2 years to use the Organise system.
What I suggest, like I said, we bring this item back specifically because of its importance. We'll bring it back. Yeah, and is that okay? And is that the point you wanted to bring up?
Yes,
that was
the response.
That was great, thank you. Serena, final comment from you then on this item, and then we'll move on.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. I'm really pleased, Abby, that you mentioned the area around progress on sustainability, because it is something I think we've done really well as a health board. And I'd like to think that we are encouraging more of this kind of initiatives to come forward, because certainly they may be minor savings, but it's about the saving in the broader term in terms of the environment, which is something that we should be, as an anchor organisation in this area, be concerned about. So what I was going to ask was, in terms of you referring your report to a sustainability action plan, and I was quite keen whether we could have any visibility of that at a board level. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can circulate it, but I'll work through, Jean, which appropriate committee it is, because it might be, Jan, that we want it to sit under the population health in terms of its wider contribution to population health. But yeah, happy to share the submissions that we've recently made, Jean.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Abby. Thank you again for that really informative report, About. So we've received it and considered it. There are some actions coming from it. There'll be another report in May on all aspects of unscheduled care and preparations, reflections from the summit that the Cabinet Secretary is holding on Monday. And if there's anything that the board can have sight of from that before the main meeting, that would be really helpful. And we're looking at positioning of a sustainability action plan as requested by Rena. And of course, there were some things we can celebrate in Abby's report as well. So we will convey our thanks and congratulations to all staff involved. So we turn now then to our risk register paper. As I said at the start, we're taking this earlier now so it can inform people's thinking as the meeting goes on. And of course, this is work in progress because we are about resetting these strategic risks, but these are what we have at the moment. So Hazel, I'm going to turn to you first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to remind board members, we signed off the strategic risk management implementation plan in November. Since then, we've revisited and looked at our strategic risk register and how we develop that. We've reconstituted the risk management group, and it meets next week, and we'll also meet monthly going forward, and this will help us drive forward that strategic risk register. So presented to you is the current health board risk register. It sets out the risks that are at or above the appetite set by the board. It contains 4 risks that have increased in LinkedIn and linked to the resources around best interest assessors to support implementation of the Mental Health Act, health and safety infrastructure, access to systemic anti-cancer therapy, and compliance with access to data through the subject access request. 2 risks have reduced, one relating to capital, and then the second one then relating to industrial action, which we take in committee as a result of sensitivities there. And then 3 risks have been de-escalated and have been managed by the service group register, relating to screening of fetal growth assessment and then gap in growth, inability to maintain birth rate plus compliance, and high quality choices in place of birth as well. So just to summarise that report, I'm happy to take questions.
Pat, please start.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Hazel. Really welcome the move to the strategic risk register, much better aligned to objectives, and for the kind of in-depth review that's planned now into risk and into risk appetite. It's going to be really helpful. a question that was raised in audit, but I thought I'd ask Hazel to cover it here. There have been issues with operational risk management in service groups, etc., and how that, you know, escalates upwards. So just if you could, Hazel, just take us through what's planned as improvement in relation to that.
So in terms of the implementation plan, there's two gateway reviews planned of the service group risk registers. So the first one will be May, and then the next one will be in November then. So whereby service group directors can then present to the risk management group their risks that we see in its entirety. So rather than relying on a level of reporting up or asking them to escalate, we see it twice a year in its entirety, and therefore can challenge, scrutinise, but also pull together the themes as well, because we'll have an operational risk register going forward as well. So there'll be much more line of sight in terms of the operational risks and how they link back up to the corporate risk register, and then impact on the strategic risk register as well.
Will there be committee oversight of that process of escalation?
Yeah, so as we have now, Steve, each risk at a corporate and strategic risk register level is assigned to committees that the boards will oversee. So that will be the same, but you'll have the added benefit of seeing the operational risk linked to corporate and strategic risk.
Nuria, put your hand up.
Yes,
So
sorry.
Nuria, then Jean.
And we discussed this, as Hannah mentioned, we discussed the risk management at length in the audit committee, and you've perhaps picked up the main, which was around escalation, and we did ask for a schematic on how we could oversee and on which stage we would see that kind of assurance coming through. I'm going to move on to specific risk. We've seen an escalation risk related to estates driven by retirement, and we did have that conversation in the audit committee. Later on the report, you'll see on the pathology report, we considered later, we've seen delayed in retirements again. Now, our concern was that those should be predictable and manageable, so we would like assurance that we do have a robust approach to succession planning, was one of the areas that we would like to see. And then we did have a query about reducing the risk in relation to capital, given that the paper on pathology and the committee update referring to key transformation plans being potentially hampered by the lack of capital. We did wonder whether the downgrading was right, or whether there might be two risks to monitor separately, one around the annual operational risk, landing the capital budget and maximising what we get, and the other one is the longer term risk that an ongoing lack of capital poses to delivery of our big plans and transforming care.
Thank you, Nuria. So we'll take the retirement succession planning issue first. And Sarah, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, certainly. So recognising it from an overarching perspective, obviously we have much within our people strategy that creates that succession planning framework that includes our leadership development, focus, our recruitment, retention and induction, which has been through the board many times, focusing specifically on the two areas that you've raised. In terms of estates, we have a new leadership team there, and my HR business partner team working with that new leadership team, looking at the challenges around an ageing workforce within the estates area. And much has been progressed already, and we're making really good progress. We've had joint sessions in terms of workforce planning with our trade unions actually around increasing our apprenticeship opportunities and looking at how we can use our retiring intern colleagues with their expertise to mentor and bringing up those to encourage succession planning. There's still a lot to do, but it's been making really good progress with that new leadership in space, and a very clear plan that is being worked in social partnership with our trade unions, which is really important. So a space to watch, absolutely, but something that we, I hope, take more confidence in terms of those plans. Around pathology, I know Christine leads the ARCH programme of work which tackles the succession planning, so I'm going to defer to Christine in terms of that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work going on in terms of workforce in pathology. I think what sparked the original work in was a critical workforce issue. There's a national UK shortage of histopathologists, and so we take the maximum number of trainees through our department we can. Our estates and our workforce limits that ability, and also with Hywel Dda, but we've done a lot with technology recruitment. So in terms of, as we get more digital pathology, that we are able to take consultants who are working remotely across the UK on sessions. They can also join MDTs in that way. We're doing a lot of work in developing advanced practice. So we've closed the gap of requirement of histopathologists by developing consultant biomedical scientists and advanced practice. Nearly all our cut-up in Swansea is done by biomedical scientists and not consultants. So we're doing a lot in that work. We've developed the apprentice workforce. We've developed the, so there's a lot of work going on in workforce. There's opportunities in the regional in terms of specialism. There's opportunities with digital pathology and being able to get much more of that second sessions with that and workforce planning. Leadership is also an issue there in terms of clinical leadership. So that's something we also need to work on in that space because, but again, we have been asked by HAIW to take additional medical trainees. At the moment, we can't within our capacity, but actually with a regional solution, that would become more possible. But also I think with digital, that would also, so digital and AI is also going to be a big innovation movement in this. So I think it's taken every opportunity. Our neighbours in Hywel Dda haven't developed the advanced practice model. We can support them to do it as a region, and that will also close some of the gaps. So there's a lot of work going on there. There's also people from Sarah's team now looking at lab medicine workforce planning because that's a different problem in terms of biomedical sciences and 24/7. So there's a lot of work going on in terms of succession planning across.
Yeah. And then I'm just going to ask Darren to comment on the capital point. Then I'll come to you and then Anne-Louise.
Thank you, Chair. So you respond, there are two risks related to capital. Risk 93, which is the one highlighted, reduces in year as we get confidence in the delivery of the capital resource, which is very much an in-year finance-focused risk. And that's a lot because we have no line of sight to balance TRL. Risk 98 on the register is the one that accepts the condition of the estate and suitability of the environment. That's quite a long-standing and detailed risk, and I think probably what we need to do through the review process is separate that operational estate risk and strategic capital risk. So we're keeping the lights, the boilers, and everything else on. The other bit is about our ambition for high-quality buildings and environments for our patients and for staff. So taking action to take that.
Yes, thank you. Helen, please come in.
Bore and my question was on the risk 43 on dolls and how the Health Board are trying to reduce that risk.
Thank you, Helen. We'll pick up on that, please, because Anne-Louise, was that something you wanted to connect with from the committee's perspective?
It was. One of the, or maybe just a practical thing, but notably in the increased risks, the three other risks have got a note suggesting what is going to happen, but there isn't any note suggesting what might be happened to be able to address this problem. And it is more critical because one of the best interest assessors is on long-term leave, on long-term sick leave. And we know that one of the problems is if you can't find best interest assessors, it affects the delayed pathway of care. So it really is very important. I'm glad to see it on the risk register, given more prominence, but I think we need to grasp that nettle. We are an outlier in terms of the numbers of BIAs that we've got.
Oh, can you comment on that, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair, no problem. To keep it brief, we started as an organisation with an extremely low baseline in relation to the infrastructure that we had to review and care for patients who require a DOLS approach. And quarter protection was another area of concern as a health board as well. Carol Killer, as a lead name within the organisation, was tasked with looking and reviewing this, and she has done successfully with support over the last 2 years. So we are in a better place than we have been, but we're comparative to other organisations. We have less best interest assessors for our population than neighbouring health boards would. We are still in talks with Welsh Government because they have supported funding over the last 2 years, because it was originally tied with the Liberty Protection Safeguards changeover, which never occurred. But they have supported us with a funding level that we have gone back also to highlight our risks, because with more infrastructure that we've had, quite rightly, we found more patients who require to have a DOLS assessment. So we were under-reporting previously as an organisation. So the positive is we are finding these patients in order to deal with them earlier on, so that we manage the expectation around their care, their hospital stay. But it has been compounded with long-term sick approach with one key member. The service does rely on an agency approach for the right level of expertise and knowledge in order to support the service in the short term. But we hope that Welsh Government will also support us in the new financial year around improving our infrastructure, around how we were able to employ to an increased level of best interest assessors to put us as an organisation within a better place. But there's also a model around teaching and education of our ward and departmental staff, so they also play their part around the support, the education and the identifying of these patients within the clinical area. So it's a two-pronged approach. It's not just seeing the best interest assessors as our only issue and our only problem to solve. We have to support the rest of the staff around understanding the infrastructure requirements and the needs of patients and how they direct complex paperwork processes that need to be followed.
Want to come back on that?
I would. I mean, I take Paul's point about its education of staff, but I know from previous experience that because I was involved in the education on best interest assessment, it doesn't seem to stick. People haven't got confidence. And I'm not sure how we get over that confidence barrier so that people understand that they do know what they're thinking about when they undertake a mental capacity assessment. But at the moment, I know that training is still ongoing everywhere because people ask for it. But somehow, when it comes down to actually seeing a patient and being able to assess them, there isn't the confidence to say, yes, this is what needs to be done. And I'm not sure how we overcome that barrier.
Well, what I'm going to do is ask Abby if we can remit this to the full executive to have a look at the whole thing and come back to it. Is that okay? Thank you very much, Anna-Louise, for that. And for Helen, does that answer your point, Helen, or is there?
Yeah, there is. Just one more point is while these patients are waiting, how are you communicating with those families? Because they are waiting longer than they should. And is there communication with the families?
Thank you. Paul, can you come back on that?
I do apologise, Chair. I was just answering a point in the room. My apologies for that.
This is about communication with families and patients when they're waiting, because of the time they are waiting. How does that process actually work?
That's the involvement with the ward staff who sit closely with patients in our hospital beds in order to inform on processes. So the education comes back there is really important. We do have a team hosted by Community and Primary Care around the assessments and a lead a nurse with her team that supports that across the health board, and especially where there are complex patients where there are delays or there are multiple issues, those patients are signposted to that team and our lead in order to go in for additional support and supervision so that we support the patient, the family, as well as the team who are supporting the individual in order to get those processes right.
So as I said, we'll remit that for a full executive review and then bring that back to the council. So Jean, take the last comment for you on this item.
Thank you, Chair. I had two observations. One is around the pace and delivery of the actions that we see reported. And the last comment, last discussion that we've just had illustrates that, as does the situation with HMP Swansea. So that's my first comment. The second comment is I was really pleased to note the progress on the reset of the board framework and together with the review of the risk register. Certainly the report gives clarity to the reporting structures, but I wondered whether we have thought about how we manage what process we have in place for reporting by exception. Because if we look at that risk report, there is one matter in there that we will have to re-escalate, although it's been de-escalated. So I just wondered what process we use for those exceptional urgent issues that we don't have to wait for this risk register review.
We do want to comment on that last point. Can we bring that back to you, Jean? Yeah. I think that would be a helpful thing to do, so we can take that away and give you a comprehensive update, if that's good.
Thank you, but it's really helpful to take this report early on in the meeting because, as I said, we can have that in mind. So, so we've received and considered it, and we've looked at that as whether we need some more assurance, and we've identified actions underway on gateway reviews around operational risk management at service weekly level. Darren, you're going to do some more differentiation around the whole capital agenda area. We are going to ask the executives to do take a look at this whole question of item as well. And then we're going to pick up the whole process on reporting by exception in a timely way rather than with providing. And anybody, please, if you think of other matters, and I have flagged when I looked at when we get to the cancer services paper, because that risk started off in 2013. And there are other risks that go back at least 10 years, which cannot be the case if we've had risks red rated for over 10 years. Something needs to change in terms of the whole process of assessment and making sure the risk relates to the current day. But we'll come back to that. Thank you. So, thank you very much. So, you've been very patient sitting there and waiting for your item now. So, doing Mark Gabronio Eto, I'm very pleased to introduce you again. So, we've got James and Catherine. So, you're going to give us a short presentation and then have discussion with the board.
We sent some slides through. It's possible to present them. I'm James Chester, Chief Medical Information Officer, and I'm with Kath, Chief Nursing Information Officer.
Can you make sure you talk up, James?
Sorry.
Because we record this, so we just need to make sure it can be heard by everyone. Thank you.
We're going to present a brief, high-level, fictional patient information story based on experiences intended to highlight the recent successes in our digital offering, but also to highlight the gaps where we could do better and to support the case and rationale for our digital strategy that you're going to hear about later on.
Can we move to the next slide, please? Our fictional patient is Mrs. Thomas. She's a 70-year-old lady known to have heart failure, diabetes, and she is overweight. She visits the GP with pain in her abdomen and a lump. And following examination, the GP diagnosed a hernia and electronically refers to a surgical specialty in secondary care, the details of her current concern, her medical history, and her current medications. The consultant can review this referral letter electronically, triage, and add Mrs. Thomas to the waiting list. And a letter is electronically sent to the GP. And through the patient portal, Mrs. Thomas can view her letters, including ability to review her outpatient appointment letter. If she doesn't view this letter in a timely manner, then it will be posted to her as well. And text reminders are sent to Mrs. Thomas, keeping her up to date and reminding her of any upcoming appointments. Most of our patients, when she visits, is digital. We can do electronic blood test requests, letters to GP, and patient information and clinic letters are all digital. So following the outpatient appointment and listing for surgery, Mrs. Thomas is brought in for her pre-assessment, which again is completed digitally, and it collates information looking at the readiness and fitness for surgery and considers comorbidities. A plan is made for surgery as an inpatient for Mrs. Thomas, and she's added to a surgical waiting list. As time passes, Mrs. Thomas is admitted for surgery, and at this point in her care, we use paper medical notes. We use our Swansea Bay patient flow solution as Signal, and this supports Mrs. Thomas's appropriateness of bed. It's visible at ward level, and it supports the clinicians' board rounds as well as communication through handovers, increasing patient safety and communication across the wider MCT involved in Mrs. Thomas's care. We use digital nursing notes with our Welsh nursing care record, and the e-prescribing system supports the prescribing administration of all medications. In theatre, we use electronic operation notes, which are generated, and the theatre use the same electronic e-prescribing. So on discharge, an electronic summary is prepared, which includes the details of the admission. This links with the current medication list and plans for future care, which is digitally sent to the GP. Throughout the journey, Mrs. Thomas is involved in her care. She's able to digitally view letters, blood results, clinic letters through our patient portal. And it should very much be noted at this point that Swansea Bay is one of the most digitally enabled health boards in Wales for planned care. And I'm now going to pass you to Dr. Chess into the next slide, please.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the patient develops an infection. Develops fever, pain over a wound, where she takes us out to the accident emergency department. Now, the digital systems that we have in an unplanned admission aren't as mature as the ones we've heard about for a planned admission. Patient attends A&E, and when they come to A&E, she'll present herself to the desk and book herself in. There, some information is taken about her case, and a paper cash card, one of these things which you may have seen, is produced. And this is the workflow of the accident emergency department. That is placed in a rack, and the patient is seen in order that the notes are placed in the rack. And eventually, the patient will see a triage nurse who will take more information to make sure she's triaged in the right order. And eventually, she'll see one of the A&E doctors or staff. They'll request some investigations, perhaps, which will be digitally enabled. But these notes then go back in the rack. There's no pin to say the investigations are back. You have to go to that rack, pull out the piece of paper, then go and look at those results. There's no trigger, there's no workflow built into it. Once the tests come back, it's clear that the patient needs to be admitted and a referral is made to the surgical team on call. This is done either over the phone or in person, or sometimes if it needs an outpatient, use paper. There's no digital system like you hear for outpatients. So the patient gets seen by the surgical doctor, and while the patient is waiting in the A&E department, a paper drug chart needs to be produced and paper nurse assessments are produced. The patient is booked to go to the ward, which we mark on the system called Signal. And when the patient is ready to leave the department, the documents that I've described here get photocopied, and a photocopy is sent to the ward. And then those documents are scanned, and those scanned documents are available just in the A&E department for future admissions or discharges. So when the patient then attends the ward, unfortunately, we're using paper medical notes. So we're back to paper again for the medical notes. The nursing notes are excellent, they're digitized, but they have to be transcribed from the paper A&E records to the electronic system. Same with the drug chart. That drug chart that was electronic for the whole journey for that patient for the planned admission has to be typed back out into the electronic system. Fortunately, the patient makes an excellent recovery and is discharged. Can we get the next slide, please? So what are the issues? Because we've got this hybrid situation, we have risk. There are multiple places to enter information. Allergies, for example, when we were just on paper, they were just recorded in perhaps maybe 2 places, but then maybe 10 places where we record allergies. There's a lot of duplication. The same information has to be put into multiple systems because we have multiple systems and put in paper. There's multiple occasions there where someone may make a mistake, and of course it's inefficient. Often staff may feel that they're a slave to a computer because they know the system's been put into one system once, but they need to put it into the other system to trigger some workflow or to make sure that the activity's been recorded correctly at that time. Our digital systems are document-based. By that I mean, when I go to look through a patient's history electronically, it's a big pile of PDFs. It's not a case that if I want to know if the patient's diabetic, I go to a screen where there's diagnoses. I have to look through every single document until I can find out whether that patient's diabetic. We have the next slide, please. Even though I was very positive about that planned admission, the bits in red are digital systems, but they don't talk to each other. So that patient's past medical history, medication, allergies will be at the very start of the journey in the GP system. But when the clinician produces the outpatient letter in the outpatient department, they will redictate that to their secretary, who will type it all back in again. When the patient is seen in a pre-assessment clinic, there's a wonderful digital system that risk stratifies the patient to find out where they should have their operation. All that data gets re-entered again. But that data doesn't feed through to the next step. It doesn't go into the nursing care record. It doesn't go into the prescription transcription system. At each point, the data has to be re-entered into the system.
Well, I don't think we could have anything better to inform us when we get to the digital strategy piece. And I'm sure that what you've been saying will have resonated with many of us who use the services, right? And that we will know exactly what happens to our data in different parts of the system. So thank you both very much for that. So shall I open it up for any questions or comments?
I don't want to work in that kind of situation at all. Can I understand what the planning looks like between the primary care and secondary care? So you've said systems don't speak to each other. If we are creating a single pathway, how does the opportunity for discussion and design and innovation manifest itself for you so that you can see that total pathway?
It's a really good question. I think until we have a true what's called shared care record, we won't be able to deliver on that. Because GPs have a great, fully digital system, but they communicate with us with a document. We don't see, and as a health board, we don't have the granular information from the primary care system available to us. We have a view into it. But until we've got a true shared care health record, we're not going to be able to deliver on that. And I understand that's something that's being considered as a large government perspective rather than as a handbook.
So is that talking about the electronic patient care record?
In its widest sense, yes. I mean, we would be looking as an organisation to address, I guess, the secondary care multiple system problem that we have, to have that rationalised single point of access to information. But then there's a wider need of this shared care record across primary care, across community services, stretching of the social services. That is connected, but I guess we would have different streams of work to get there.
Being quite Machiavellian about this, imagine the money that we would save across Wales if we just take out that. What are we spending in people and cost without productivity?
This falls into the category of complicated versus complex too, and distinguishing between both. I think one of the areas for me that is really important is about that patient from the start of the journey in terms of how we facilitate their care. And it's understanding those conversations, the really basic conversations, because the technology is there to facilitate it, for us to hold that care that we all want to see, the utmost quality of care. And it's that process, the discussions that we have with patients is so important too. And it's built in that alongside the technology. I don't want to add, but for me, it's key, is that facilitation of those conversations of what matters to you from the very beginning, how we build that digitalized alongside.
Thank you. So I've got Anne-Louise, then Helen. Anne-Louise, please come in. Thanks.
What happens if Mrs. Thomas goes to visit her daughter in, I don't know, in Manchester, and she has some acute care there, and then she comes home to Swansea and has an appointment in Swansea, follow up for something she'd had done here? How does Swansea know what happened in Manchester, because she's a bit forgetful?
So the only document that would generally transfer from Manchester to us would be the discharge summary. So it would just be a summary of the output of the admission. The granular information like CT scans, blood results, things like that wouldn't get transmitted. We're slightly ahead in that we have a patient portal, so we can often use the patient portal to transmit the information about our patients to another hospital. So if it was the other way around and our patient went to Manchester, when they're in Manchester, the clinicians there can get permission from the patient to view the patient portal, and then they'll be able to see the blood results and the letters. So we have enabled that, which gives the power for the patient to share her record. But unless they're using a patient portal in Manchester, there's no way to transmit granular information.
We know, I mean, our completion of discharge summaries is not ideal. It's not 100% and it can be very slow. How, if she's in Manchester and comes back to Swansea but needs more care, what you're suggesting is we're entirely dependent on what Mrs. Thomas can remember happened when she was up in Manchester.
If there's no distrust, that's correct. And often if that would be the case, I would try and find out who they were in the patient was in care of, contact the secretary and ask for distrust summary to be produced.
There are a lot of holes to fall through, aren't there?
Ellen, can you go for the final words for you on this?
Aye, thanks. I had a meeting yesterday with the digital team on the patient app, which I thought was really good, and we did some brainstorming to see how we can promote this. So there are steps for the patient app in rheumatology, dermatology, ENT going forward. So, but it was an excellent meeting, and I just wanted to feed that back.
Thank you very much, Helen. That's some good positive. That's a positive note on which we can end this discussion, but you've given us such food for thought when we come to the digital strategy conversation. I know you're going to stay with us for that. So you're very welcome to do so. Matt, just run this off before
Just
we
to
move on.
finish off, I thought that was really important, and given we see our ambition made in digital strategy, that we bring our clinical digital lead in this morning. Both of them are absolutely instrumental in delivering what we've delivered so far with the tools that we have. You know, they're not the perfect tools in the world, but we've been working. We've done some great stuff with these two already. So they're having clinical leads who understand digital is going to be the way forward for us.
So we are way behind, as you know. So we take two more items before we have like a 15-minute break. So if we take the JCC presentation and then we take the IMGP and we give that the time we need to give it, then we'll have 20-minute break. Then we'll come back, and then later on we have another 10 minutes. So we'll get 30 minutes, but not necessarily 30 minutes together. So forgive me for that. So I hope that's okay with everyone. So we'll move then to colleagues who are joining us online from the Joint Commissioning Committee. And Boridar, can you introduce yourselves to us, please?
Yeah, Boridar, thank you, Chair and Pawb. I'm Stacey Taylor, the Interim Chief Commissioner at the Joint Commissioning Committee, and I'm also joined by George Galetly.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, George Galetly. I'm the Director of Transition Transformation at the JCC.
Thank you very much. So we have 20 minutes for this item. So I know you want to make a presentation to us first, so you'll have a slide deck for that, and then I'm going to open it up for discussion. So I'll hand over to you at that point. Professor Hay.
Thank you, Chair, and all. And apologies from Ian Green today. He was attending, but unfortunately he's had to go to another board meeting, and so he's scooted off to do that. So I'll do my best to take you through these slides in a swift way as I possibly can, just to make sure that we leave some time for questions. I do have to be at another meeting at 12 o'clock, unfortunately. But we'll do our best in the next 20 minutes. That's really good time, so thank you very much, Chair. So just in terms of the slide deck, just want to give us a little bit of an introduction on who we are and what we do. We'll focus a little bit on our establishment to date. You'll be aware that we are a reasonably new joint committee, and so board will be interested to see where we've got to with our establishment and our transition to date, a little bit about our organisational change, and then a little bit about the focus of the future in terms of what it means for next steps. So Ian would normally do these slides as a bit of an intro, but it's worth me probably saying that we are a joint committee of all of the 7 health boards. I think it's unique in that it's probably the only arrangement across Wales where all of the 7 health boards chief executives come together to be able to make decisions on behalf of all of Wales. And Ian regularly says that when he started his role as chair, one of the things that he was conscious of is whether he would get the bandwidth of some very, very many busy people coming together to provide decisions on behalf and to commission on behalf of all of Wales. And if he was here today, he would be thanking those chief executives because the focus and the time commitment from the chief executives have been exceptional, really. So we are a committee of the 7 chief executives alongside up to 5 lay members and an independent chair, and as the interim chief commissioner who will shortly step down, and Hugh George will be coming in as our interim chief commissioner from the 1st of April onwards. The Chief Commissioner does have accountable officer status, and therefore will report directly into Judith for those matters of accountability. And then we've got a committee of lay members who are also appointed by the Cabinet Secretary to have a bilateral relationship with the 7 chief executives and the health boards. And then finally, just on this sort of section, just to say that we have got a senior leadership team, and that has currently gone through a recent transitioning programme, and out the other side. By and large, the structure is developed from 3 predecessor organisations, and you may be aware of what those were, or the National Collaborative Commissioning Unit, the predecessor EASC and the predecessor WISC committees. And by and large, our structure reflects a matrix approach to allow us to be able to bring those expertise in commissioning together, as well as sort of corporate functions across finance, planning, nursing, so on and so forth. So in the context of what we do and how we organise ourselves, we're broadly split into those 3 key core areas: specialised services, including, you know, specialties throughout cancer and blood, cardiac, respiratory conditions, renal, neurosciences, and some women and children's. Mental health, including the commissioning of the medium secure unit at Swansea Bay. Health board from a provider perspective, but also other secure mental health and adult, high secure mental health, child and adolescent mental health services, gender service. We are transitioning through the sexual assault referral centres from the NHS executive over the coming weeks. And also then, last but not least, the commission of the Welsh Ambulance Service for Wales, including emergency transport, non-emergency transport, and the recent transition of 111. On top of that, where the 7 health boards agree that collective commissioning or that commissioner on an all Wales basis would be helpful or beneficial, then the 7 health board chief executives may ask us to take on commissioning of those regional or national services, as well as any services that are directed by Welsh Government or the Welsh Health Ministers. So what does that look like for Swansea Bay? Well, around 3,500 patients from the Swansea Bay area access services throughout 23-24. And there's some examples there of some of the services that Swansea Bay residents would have accessed from a specialist services perspective, probably some from within the own organisation itself, so within Swansea Bay as a provider, some from England, and then some highly specialised services, including transplant surgery and some highly specialised drug treatments from across the border. In terms of money, I'm conscious I whistle through some of these slides, but I just think in context of these slides in the 20 minutes, it'll be important to just get them through quite quickly. Swansea Bay is currently a contributor of around 12% of our £1.2 billion budget overall, but also a provider for us, probably receiving about 13% of our budget overall, so probably a net provider, Commissioner. And if we used to split the way that we spend our money slightly differently by service area, you'll see that, well, the first largest chunk is to the ambulance service as we commission the whole organisation, but then followed by cancer, blood, women and children's, and cardiac. I thought it may be important to take you through a couple of slides which actually talks about us as a committee and us as a team, and how we've spent the last 12 months really focusing on our transition to the establishment of the JCC and the team itself. So I'll hand over to George just to take us through a couple of slides on that, and maybe just finalise then on our plan for next year, and then kind of our next steps. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Stacey. So yeah, established on the 1st of April, and since then we've been working really hard to try and set up the new governance framework and make sure that that is very clearly understood. Obviously a fully functioning committee with the lay members. We've recruited to virtually all of those roles now. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, and also share with you what our vision, mission, strategic objectives are. So there's been quite a lot of progress since establishment, but we now need to focus on embedding a lot of that. So very quickly then, strategic objectives, we've got 5. They've been developed with the joint committee, but also in strong engagement with all of the staff as well. And they set the tone of all of our direction of travel to become the Centre of Excellence for Collaborative Commissioning. And as Stacey said, we had 3 organisations come together as one. So naturally, you've got 3 cultures, 3 ways of doing things. And what we wanted to do is establish quite early on some values and behaviours and set a culture of collaboration across the JCC and obviously out from the JCC into health boards as well. So again, worked very closely with our staff on these. Started off with 3, and as a result of a really comprehensive consultation with staff, added an extra one about that striving for excellence to make sure that we are that centre of excellence and that we are a continually learning and evidence-based organisation. So this is our sort of transition on a page to routine business, and we're in that sort of orange box in the middle where we are right now. So towards the left-hand side, we've got our subcommittees established. We've got a collaborative commissioning leadership group established, which is a real key a stakeholder engagement forum that's chaired by the Chief Commissioner, engages with executives from across all of the health boards. And it was only established in January, but we've been working very closely and frequently with that group in the development of the foundation plan for the JCC for this coming year. So it really is a critical engagement, and it's also there to help with that close connection between the executives and Abby as Chief Commissioner sitting on the joint committee and in supporting the decision making to make sure that that flows through. So that's all set up. We're going to develop that and strengthen that as we move forward. And we will be looking at a commissioning approach in relation to our longer term commissioning strategy for the JCC, which will be moving forward, and we'll be developing at that pace in the new financial year. We have, as Stacey said, recently gone through organisational change to set up our new structure. That's going to be implemented from the 1st of April. So really looking forward to establishing that in our new ways of working, matrix model, as Stacey has said. So a real collaborative approach to that. And you'll see at the bottom there, the culture and the organisational development plan is critical as well. So that's really starting to take shape. And the OD plan is something that we need to make sure that is again developed through staff, but it's multifactorial. It's the committee, it's the SLT of the JCC, and it's also supporting the staff in their development in the new ways of working as well. So you can see that obviously we've got a little bit of a way to go to routine business, but we're well on the way and making good progress. I'll hand over back to Stacey now because she'll just do a very quick overview of where we are with our plan. Thanks, Stacey.
Thanks, George. And assuming, Abby, a lot of this may seem very familiar to you as an instrumental part of our team when we are establishing our structures and as we move through the transition year. But just to focus a little bit on our on where we are and where we've got to. So as I said, we've had part of the challenge in this year is how you bring together 3 different organisations, 3 different teams, 3 different styles and approaches into what is one cohesive team that works together to deliver collaborative commissioning across all of Wales. My lights go off, but also think about what a plan could look like for us for next year. And I think when we worked with the chief executives this year across the Joint Commissioning Committee, it became really clear that what we really need is a strategy, particularly around specialised services, but for the JCC in its entirety, actually, because how that links with the provision of ambulance services and what is our real strategy around mental health become really important. And so we discussed with chief executives producing an annual plan for this year that we have coined our foundational plan. And in front of us really is our plan on a page that actually articulates, not spreading ourselves too thinly, but really focusing on some key instrumental core areas that we can really concentrate on as we are deemed transformational areas that can help us spend a little bit of time thinking about next year, what our strategy needs to look like for the next 10 years, so that we could truly underpin an IMTP for 26 and beyond, 29 beyond. I appreciate that the plan this year and through its discussions the conversations with chief executives. They have been challenging at times. We all recognise the financial challenge that NHS Wales is in, and I'll recognise only too well the challenges of Swansea Bay as a health board, particularly as it tries to land its IMTPO annual plan for this year. The financial economic environment as we currently find ourselves in is extremely challenging, and difficult choices and decisions do need to be made. And that is incredibly difficult when we're trying to balance all of those choices across 7 different organisations in 7 different places, recognising fundamentally where Swansea Bay are as an organisation. For next year, that landed us in a 4% uplift, which I appreciate completely is significantly higher than the 1.77% that have come from Welsh Government. But all of that has gone into patient care, into access for our populations, into the services that are commissioned by the JCC. And what is really important that even that will be a stretch, and we will need to deliver significant efficiencies across the system from all of our providers to allow us to manage within that 4%. But what is really critical is that we spend our next 12 months thinking about our population need, how we apply a value lens, and how we more importantly think about the policy direction in the broader sense of prevention to help us get to a more financially sustainable position going forward. Just to finish up, just mindful of time. So a little bit about our assurance and the subcommittees that have been set up. So you may or may not be aware, we are hosted by Cwmtaf Morgannwg as a health board organisation, and our subcommittee structures have been set up either through those as a host for audit and risk, for example, or through our own subcommittee structure of quality, safety and outcomes, as well as planning, performance and finance. And there are a number of other accountabilities that flow through our structures. And then finally, just to focus a little bit on the future, so we need to implement our new structure as of the 1st of April. As I said, it's really important that we develop a commissioning strategy throughout next year that's underpinned by a commissioning framework with a key focus on value and transformation, that we deliver the foundational plan as set out for 25-26 and approved by the 7 chief executives on the 18th of March, that we work truly collaboratively for and on behalf of the 7 health boards in order to deliver a collective commissioning for NHS Wales, and to understand what it takes to be a centre of excellence for collaborative commissioning. So thank you very much for allowing us the time to run through those slides, albeit it did feel quite quick, but open to any questions or any sort of comments or observations, Chair.
Thank you, Stacey. George, that's a really helpful, as you say, whistle-stop tour through the JCC. We'll make sure that the slides are circulated to all the board members. And from May, the board will have a new report on planning in partnerships that we will read on. And the work of the JCC will feature in that. So from now on, there'll be a regular update to the board on this area of work. So I would want to say anything before I ask any wider comments.
Yeah, just thank you both for the presentation, and apologies to Ian. He will appreciate that we had a lot of interest in our earlier items on the agenda. For me, I guess the critical bit is that there are a couple of key elements in here that will feature in other items on our agenda, and appreciate George and Stacey that you won't be here, so it's probably worth touching upon them. Clearly, we've got our annual plan stroke IMTP coming as our next item, and we have 2 hats to play in this regard. One is the Commissioner for our population through the JCC, at which stretching to a 4% uplift is really difficult for us if you consider that we had a 1.77 uplift. So that is really, really challenging for us. We discussed 3 different scenarios in terms of implication, and discussed that very rigorously, as you say, Stacey, in terms of the JCC meeting itself, where we debated this, and a lot of work has gone into getting us to that place. But as a provider, it presents us with risks in terms of the cost of delivering our services, and some of those propositions that we put forward as a provider that haven't been progressed as part of this year's plan, which is why welcoming the wider commissioning strategy is really important, because we can't carry on in the same vein with a with a kind of horizon scanning process that identifies things we would like to do, or some real risk issues from our own services that we want to put on the agenda. And we're not able to get line of sight to those things. So recognising the positioning of the foundational plan, I think that's really helpful as we go forward to that strategy. And I think as a population and as commissioners sat around that table, we will need to make some really difficult decisions about how and where and when our populations access some of those more high cost and highly specialist services. And we need to make sure that the conversations around the clinical model for ambulance as part of our unscheduled care and mental health as we move forward and modernise our mental health services are also picked up. So there's a lot in this agenda for us as a specialist and tertiary service provider, as well as the importance of the integrated services that are provided, that are commissioned on behalf of our population, and we'll touch all of our population. Every single one of our patients is probably accessing through 111 in the course of the year. So really helpful orientation around that. Just to flag, Stacey, you probably won't be here for the an agenda item we've got later on when we're talking about our maternity and neonatal services. Very pleased that you drew out in the presentation the review of neonates. That cannot come soon enough for us, because we are aware about the fragility of the service and the pressure to make sure that expectant mums and their babies are cared for in the most appropriate environment, and that's timely. So we're keen to make sure that progress as well. Jen, I'll stop at that point. So maybe other
That's
comments.
really helpful context setting there. Any comments or questions for Stacey or George at this stage, recognising that the board will now get bi-monthly updates on the work of JCC on May? Darren, did you want to say anything on financial position?
Just briefly, thank you both. Thanks for the presentation. We've brought in the 4% into the, and we'll discuss after this matter. But we also brought in obviously the circular flow of the money and the benefits that the increased commissioning will give to us as a provider. So we're playing both those roles equally in the discussion later on in terms of our overall financial plan. It is challenging. I think I really welcome the focus on population need, value and effectiveness. And in a lot of this, your value and effectiveness is ours, because we're providing as well as commissioning in this space. So I think there's probably a developing conversation on how that would work. And we're starting to work hard on re-establishing what good contractual mechanisms look like in our LTAs, both with yourselves and with our neighbouring health boards and trusts. We'll probably benefit from a close relationship for the next 12 months to understand how we can optimise that for both parties and then take that forward.
Any other comments, questions?
Jean? Just one comment, that this actually feeds very well into the regional economy work.
Yeah.
So I think it's great that we're going to have the update on the bi-monthly basis.
And Stacey, Georgia, what we may do as well, we have the regional joint committee set up with Power. We have the next meeting on the 7th of May, and we could perhaps discuss there how we may take the JCC issues at a regional level as well. So that would be really good. So can I thank you both again, John Fawr and Mike Amther and Mike Cyfraniadau. So thank you very much again for your time this morning, the contribution you've made to really the increasing the knowledge base of the board in terms of the work that you're doing for new JCC. And we look forward to receiving regular updates, particularly around the validation of plan as it affects us in this coming year, and then the broader commissioning strategy. And we'll make sure to engage with yourselves on the wider regional joint committee deal. Yeah. And we're now to our final item before we take a break, which is the most important items on our agenda this morning. So we will take the necessary time to go through it. On our integrated medium-term plan with a particular focus for 25-26. And just for those who look in on the board, as I said earlier, board members will have seen earlier drafts on this. So that's one of the reasons why some aspects are taken as read on behalf of the board. So Marie, I'm going to hand over to you to start, then Darren, then Pat, then Abby on the AO role in all this, and then I'm going to accompany that more widely. Marie, just over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, colleagues, I am not going to labour this too much, but there are some specifics I would like to draw your attention to. So just in terms of commending the plan to you, I will provide an overview of the structure and the key content of the plan before coming to the recommendations in the accompanying cover paper, which we need to, as a board, discuss and consider carefully, because how the position we take on those clearly is going to be crucial. Before I start, I just wanted to acknowledge the contributions from across the whole of the organisation and with a number of our partners in the process that has produced this document, because this document, whilst it's important in terms of discussion for today, the process that we applied to come up with this plan and the process that we will continue to apply to strengthen and further develop this plan, as the discussion that we will have certainly after this will underline the importance of is the crucial part. So a really robust process, well engaged across the organisation, not just executive level, but at corporate team and service team and across our wider partners. So I just wanted to emphasise how important that has been and will continue to be, because it is absolutely key to deliver the ambitions that we've articulated in this document. Again, just important to note that the assumptions in the JCC foundational plan, as Darren has said, have been factored in to the annual plan, because this is an annual plan. It's a one-year plan in the context of a 3-year framework, and it has to be an annual plan because we haven't been able to get to a position of financial balance by the end of 2025-26, which means that we are obliged to put a one-year plan in. But as Darren has said, we have built in the JCC foundational planning assumptions, which is difficult in the financial context, but probably more positive from a provider perspective, because it has enabled us to put some investment in the areas of risk for us in terms of our specialised services. So just a really quick gallop, because I know we need to get to some of the detail and certainly some of your questions, but what I'll do is just quickly gallop through the kind of geography of the plan so that you're clear what's being presented to you, recognising, as Jan said, that hopefully quite a few colleagues have had the opportunity to review and reflect on its content, albeit we haven't had it really as robustly tested as we would like, and we will pick that up in the process next year. So strategic context, really important to stress the UHB's role as a system partner whose contribution is essential in terms of improving the health and well-being of our population, and that's a strategic responsibility that we take very seriously, and I hope that's reflected in the plan as it's framed. So that's key strategic priority number one. Key strategic priority number two is ensuring that we are organising ourselves to deliver against the critical cabinet secretary priorities as have been laid out in the planning guidance, and to continue to evidence how we are continuing to progress against the delivery of our 5 strategic objectives, which clearly articulates our direction of travel. As I've said, the focus is on 25-26 in terms of this particular document, and the emphasis for us is about ensuring that we have a relentless focus on quality and safety of our services, and we know that we've got some particular risks in some particular areas that are going to require a special focus and emphasis, and the conversation we've had around risks and some of those quality metrics earlier will suggest that there are no surprises for you in terms of the areas that we think to fall into that category. The second area of focus this year will be around ensuring that we have a really structured and robust approach to improving on the delivery of service efficiencies and having much tighter grip and control on our avoidable expenditure. So optimising value, managing our revenue commitments are significant priority too. So in terms of what that looks like at a high level, page 20 and 21 of the document will give you a high level plan on a page which articulates those big priorities against our strategic objectives, and then show how our plan is aligned against the Cabinet Secretary enabling actions, of which there was 36. We kind of saw those when they came out of the planning guidance and slightly grown. However, when you look at the detail within those enabling actions, they are really helpful in terms of helping us focus on those areas where we know we need to get maximum value and maximum performance. So we have found those a very welcome supplementation to the planning framework and guidance offered by Welsh Government as well. We move on then to the financial implications and the size of the opportunity to improve grip and control, and the very clear focus and approach that we will take to driving efficiency and optimising value. It is a huge challenge. I don't think there's anyone in this room who takes it lightly. We recognise that the extent of the efficiency and savings programme that we will have to deliver this year still leaves us far short of where we would want to be and where the Cabinet Secretary needs us to be. So despite the numbers that we currently have in the financial plan, and we'll move on to discuss it in more detail with Darren shortly, we know that that's not far enough from the Welsh Government perspective. We will still need to improve upon that position. But what we wanted to bring to you today was a credible plan that we can work with from the beginning of April, recognising that ideally we will have further to go. And we can talk about what that would look like and how we might seek additional support to get there. But it is still a work in progress. And the clear ambition is not just to improve in year, but to continue to improve the position year on year. And you'll see that from the year 2 and year 3 financial forecasts that we intend to ensure that it's a continuously improving position in the next 3 years. But we'd like year 1 to be better than we've currently got it. And then the following section in the plan gives an articulation of how we think the proposed approach will deliver in terms of our key areas of performance, so in planned care, unscheduled care, and then in terms of cancer, quality, safety, and mental health. So those are some of the key areas where we are looking for very specific, measurable improvements in terms of performance and delivery. So we've articulated against those headings where we think we can get to, where we have the baseline data in order to inform that. And we are working on some of those measures because at this point, not all of them are measurable in the way that Welsh Government are asking, which they're aware of and working with us to address. The next section of the document describes the ways of working and emphasises how we will operate as an organisation with our partners, how we're aligned with national policy and strategy, the emphasis on our role in terms of supporting population health improvement, our role as a commissioner in terms of both the commissioning and delivery of high quality care, and very importantly, how we will do that with our partners. And we have partners not just in the regional partnership board space with our local authority and voluntary sector colleagues, but also with neighbouring health boards in a joint committee context and with Cardiff and Vale in terms of looking at some of the partnership work we need to do in the specialised services arena. And that, if you look at the JCC foundational plan, it's going to be really important this year in terms of both cardiac and thoracic and the enabling services. So there's some quite significant ambitions articulated by the JCC that will require close collaboration between ourselves and the Cabinet to deliver, and that will not be insignificant. Again, just really quickly, and then I promise I will shut up and take questions. The focus in terms of service delivery and improvement. So you'll see how we have articulated by system the key delivery priorities that we want to progress next year. So we've got unscheduled care, planned care, mental health, children and women, and cancer services, and we have identified very clearly what the delivery actions and the outcomes would look like under those key headings. So there is something against which we will be reporting and expecting to be held account to. In terms of delivering on the financial performance and our efficiency improvements, so we will have, in terms of a delivery framework, we will have our unscheduled care programme board, planned care programme board, special programmes, which are the ones that you would expect to see that align with our key corporate risks and areas of quality concern. So we have put in special programme arrangements for all of those areas. And then our fourth programme delivery vehicle will be our sustainability board, which has been strengthened and will continue to those significant challenges that we've outlined in the plan. And then we have, in the last sections of the plan, identified the enabling activities, digital estates, workforce, etc., how we intend to underpin those delivery programs at corporate level in order to ensure that we have every opportunity for success. I cannot overemphasize the importance of the close working relationships with local authority colleagues, particularly in terms of unscheduled care and ongoing care in the community. That is an area of utmost priority, which will help to unlock other areas of performance if we can get that right. So that might not come out as strongly as I'd like it to in this plan, but again, it will come back to board routinely as part of my planning partnerships update, how we are refreshing, updating governance and responsibilities within the RPV to ensure that we've got a truly integrated approach across health and social care to help unlock the rest of our system, both in terms of population health improvement, but also in terms of delivery of services in our system. Okay, at that point, I will pause for breath and be happy to hand over to Darren, who will hopefully walk us through the financial detail that we put in the cover paper, and then presumably Jan will then get follow on with the recommendations. So, yeah, Darren, so here to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, board members. So the report sets out the financial assessment over pages 5, 6, and 7, and obviously there's detail in the document itself. Just to reiterate, it is an incredibly challenging financial outlook we have. We are up for meeting that challenge, and there is opportunity to meet that challenge. At risk of repetition, it's important, and we'd like to thank independent members for the support, scrutiny, and challenge we've had over the last 3 months since the allocation letter came out, and not least the very detailed discussion we had in the Performance and Finance Committee on Tuesday of this week, where we had a detailed scrutiny session, and many members were present for that, for which I'm very grateful. Board members will be familiar with the table on page 6, and that's where I'm going to focus my introduction to the plan, so you can locate in those numbers, and which is the 3-year assessment for the board. And I'd just like to highlight that and take you through the 3 key components really of what's driving our financial position. Firstly, the underlying run rate of the deficit coming into this year from last year to 92.5 million. It's the highest it's been. And whilst we've done all that we can to achieve the financial forecast for this year of 43.7 million, the majority of the activities we've had to do this year to get there have been non-recurrent in nature, and therefore the underlying position is masked by the things we've done on a one-off basis. We've been very overt about that. Our risk register reflects that we have struggled to make recurrent savings of scale, albeit in the financial year we're still currently in, we have done better than in previous years. So we are developing a pedigree for recurrent savings delivery. We need more, and we need them to stick, and that's incredibly important. It's also important, therefore, to understand that because of that, the methodologies that we have in place at the moment to manage expenditure will not be lifted from the 1st of April, and effectively that year-end boundary from a financial perspective is not bound in any other sense. We will continue with those controls, and we will enhance those controls through the recovery and sustainability position into the new financial year. It's incredibly important that we maintain that and that the organisation understands. And the second part of the plan then is what does next year look like in isolation? Our assessment of additional costs for 25-26 is approaching 36.9 million, and that's the middle part of the plan, sections B and C. That includes the discussion we've just had with JCC colleagues, and I really want to stress at this point that the costs in that section are very accurate, or as accurate as we can be in reflection, largely unavoidable, if not almost exclusively unavoidable costs next year. Previous plans for this board have had choices around investment. We've stepped into that, and we have made a very different set of assumptions around the planning process this year. It's investment almost zero, rather investment light, and what's incredibly challenging to the organisation. I welcome the fact that we've been able to do that in such a mature way through quite difficult conversations to get. So the 36.9 million new costs for next year, we've spent a lot of time benchmarking that through our regional discussions financially as held up, just to test and challenge assumptions, and through Deputy Directors of Finance in particular, we've done that across Wales as well. So we have a moderated and assessed set of outputs from that. That 36.9 million new cost for next year is offset by 15.3 million pounds worth of allocation from cost government. Came out of the allocation letter just before the results. That's a 1.77% uplift. But I do need to be absolutely clear, that's just the base allocation, and we understand that both the wage award and the impact of national insurance contributions from employers will be covered separately. So actually the uplift for the organisation will be significantly more than 1.7%, it just comes in a different way. Will be met by costs that the organisation will incur at that point in time. So for next year, taking everything else in isolation, next year's cost pressure is another 21.7 million. And if we had a 2% savings programme, that would largely handle the pressure for next year. But because we're taking the legacy of this year into next, we have to address not only the pressures that rise in year next year, but we also have to start to considerably and substantially and sustainably eat into the deficit as well. So the third part of the plan then relates to the savings programme. We have in this plan and in the document an ambition to save 5% next year. That's 55 million. That's not dissimilar to large organisations in England. I know the model's different, but I've had the opportunity to benchmark where we are with multi-billion pounds organisations, and 5% is sort of in the zones. We know that's probably reasonable and very stretching. My suggestion professionally would be anything more than that tends to test credibility planning assumptions. So we believe the 5% is both stretching and credible in terms of the construct of the plan. But that's 55 million pounds we need to release from the organisation sustainably and safely next year. When you bring the opening deficits of part one, the in-year position for next year, part two, and our current savings position, part three, into play, that results in an opening or a closing deficit for next year of 58.7 million, which is more than this year, and it's substantially more than the 70 million target control total for the organisation. So we know that we need to do more, and we know that's not an acceptable position, but it does represent the robust output of the plan that we have at this stage. I've had constructive discussions with colleagues in Welsh Government and the NHS Executive Finance Plan Department about some support to help us improve on that position, and to do that with more pace and with more scale. That may not necessarily just be about savings, that would be about our run rate reductions and creative ideas. So it's bringing more to the table and bringing capacity and support into the organisation for those who will have to deliver these savings, to make sure that the savings can stick. They can do their day jobs, and we have the right levels of implementation skill and capacity around those people who do that. But the majority of the money I talk about here is out in the organisations with people delivering care. So we need to do that very, very safely. I'll reiterate the point that we're absolutely clear this forecast is built on strong analysis and detail, but it doesn't represent a supportable financial outlook. We need to consider that in the spirit of recommendations, which I know we'll discuss later on. In addition to the numerical analysis and the process and the structure and the shape, we've also introduced further governance enhancements through the Recovery and Sustainability Board. There's a diagram on page 7 of the report, which just shows how our savings framework and all the architecture under that, Recovery and Sustainability Board, and further choices we will need to make, will locate into the Recovery and Sustainability Board, which will then report, as it does now, to the Performance Finance Committee and the board as well. We'll be clear about how those things work. That will be driven by a balance of executive leadership to look at cross-system opportunities across the health board, help again our colleagues who are delivering care to the board itself to do that. It will be supported by a programme of work which has been refreshed and will be implemented from the 1st of April in the Recovery and Sustainability Board, which can be discussed in detail later this week. And further choices that we're formulating, that we'll need to discuss those in the next steps in the iteration of the plan. So just to come finally back then to the table in the page above, and just take the 3-year perspective, because I've deliberately laboured on next year and the challenges that we face. If we continue with assumptions that inflation will be broadly what it is now and the allocations will not change, you can see in that table that we go from 58.7 to 33.7 to 16.4. There are a lot of assumptions in that, but that's a model I can use based on the methodology this year. So at the end of year 3, we could be close to target control total, but I think our very real challenge is year 3 is too far away. What can we do to bring that forward safely, sustainably and credibly, so we can get to target control total as soon as possible, because that will still require a 12% savings ask over whatever that time is. I'll probably pause there, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you, Darren. It's a very sobering assessment. And the full board relies very much on its committees to do a lot of heavy lifting of us all, and Performance and Finance Committee, particularly this time of year, analysing and assessing the credibility of the plans and whether or not the financial assessments, planning, and the sort of overall financial position is such that the board is in a position to approve the plan or not. So we did have very detailed Finance and Finance Committee earlier in the week. And perhaps I can ask you now to take the full board through the advice and the comments from Performance and Finance.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we did undertake, or we have over a number of weeks, taken a very detailed review of the plan, noting, of course, that the overall financial position of £58 million deficit is not acceptable, and the 25 to 26 annual plan can't be approved, and we need to do further work on that. I'll just take you through various points that either gave assurance or things. So members have taken assurance from the restated financial base for 25-26 financial plan. It's an underlying deficit that is based on month 8 position in 24-25, and it does provide a far more solid baseline for service groups and directorates, albeit there'll be risks in that and there'll be opportunities in that moving forward. Savings plan for the next 3 years, as Darren has shown, at 12% or 133 million. These are extremely challenging and are going to require a radical all-system transformation program to deliver this. It's not simply, apportioning savings across our finance role. And it's going to be informed by health board and service group risks and opportunities, and the refreshed clinical services plan to ensure alignment to clinical groups across service group boundaries. Questions are going to need to be addressed on whether the shape of service groups and functional content of units is going to be right to deliver the kind of transformational change needed. And the change programme, as Maria's pointed out, is going to be very dependent on robust partnership working with local authorities, the RPV and other health boards. We have taken assurance from the fact that 10 full-time equivalent posts have been identified additionally in-house to support the recovery and sustainability programme. There's 3 vacant posts in that need to be recruited at pace, and Darren has confirmed that the 2 digital posts will be brought in at pace, because they're essential in terms of the information architecture needed to develop and monitor delivery of the savings as we go forward. So that's going to be critical. In terms of the robustness of savings plans themselves, there is a need to ensure, there's going to be a need to ensure very clear accountability for delivery across all areas. Audit Wales has raised our budget holders to account and our escalation framework as needing some improvement as part of the structured assessment. And Darren is looking at examples of good practice that Audit Wales are going to send through, and PSC will have a look at those to inform any changes that need to be made. We meet with service groups 3 times a year. We need to consider the information we're going to need to look at that reviews and go forward. There isn't a particular reference to performance management framework in the presentation. I think we're going to amend for that and bring that forward. In terms of the savings themselves and the robustness of those, of the 55.4 million savings, there's only been 14.3 million definitely identified to date. 11.3 of that was red status red still. So assurance in relation to the savings in particular remains limited, and it's difficult to assess service group confidence or finance confidence in those at this point. There are 29 areas yet to be assessed, however, and these are under review by the Recovery and Sustainability Board. And as part of its review, PFC has asked that time is set aside for the further very detailed reviews of those savings as we move forward, and we're going to build those into the plan. We got further assurance really from the governance around the Recovery and Sustainability Programme and Board. The membership is right, that Abby is chair, the RS director in post, the internal support for the programme, it's very robust. And work is still needed at pace, however, on the development of the digital architecture that provides that information base. So that's one thing, but one shortfall at the moment that needs to be looked at. We did take significant further assurance that external support is going to be given, and again at pace, hopefully by the end of April. This will provide a very critical external layer of assurance that needs to be implemented and PSC agrees fully with the specifications for that service that Darren has developed in conjunction with the Welsh Government. The external team could also bring examples of good practice from across the NHS in England, Wales, etc. So in summary, we do have a reasonable level of confidence in the plans and approach taken by the Health Board. We are in a very different place to last year at this point. We have more granularity and a good line of sight on the process. The scale of the savings, however, is extremely challenging, as we've noted, requiring whole system transformational change and a need to strengthen accountability and clarity on the consequences of not delivering. We need a real step up into the urgency of pace and delivery and ongoing scrutiny of savings as they emerge. I think that's any colleagues I find that want to add anything. But
Any finance committee members want to add anything?
I'd just say that Marie referenced special programs that are in the plan. I think they're unfunded and they will cost. So you've got to find a bit more. As we said the other day, there's a cushion required. I know it's impossible to imagine. It's a concrete cushion, and it's going to be necessary.
And that's not quantified yet.
Part of emerging work coming through the special programs through the year.
So, did you want to come in? So, the Health Board, like other public bodies in Wales, has to comply with the provisions of managing Welsh public money. And the accountable officer for any organisation has specific responsibilities within the provisions of that requirement. So Abby's going to give us her accountable officer assessment now before the board can make any decision.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. And for colleagues who are not aware, that when you get appointed into one of these jobs, you get a long letter that sets out your responsibilities as accountable officer. And I've done the first level of training, and I'm off to London to do a very in-depth training with the Civil Service College in the next couple of weeks. But fundamentally, that's absolutely right, Jan. It's about making sure that as stewards of a large amount of public money, we are doing everything within the organisation to make sure that we are making best use of every pound of public money that we are spending. At the moment, we are spending money beyond our means, money that is not allocated to us or come through our commissioning arrangements, which is requiring Welsh Government to fund the deficit. And that is a very uncomfortable position to be in as an accountable officer. I take assurance around the process that we put in place this year. I think in terms of our governance, our processes, bringing together the corporate departments and the service groups to really own this together. And it feels like we've strengthened that process in the last quarter of the year to bring this plan to fruition. We have to balance as an organisation the safety of our services and our requirement to deliver financial balance moving forward. And my assessment, John, is that as you've described, and thank you very much to the committee's really useful session in terms of scrutinising, asking questions. It's really helpful to us. But my assessment is that we are presenting the best we can at this point in the year in terms of the work that we've done to date. We have got a battle rhythm now in terms of further populating the savings programme. We have identified and discussed a range of areas where they'll be on the difficult decisions to reach table in terms of further things that we are exploring and we will bring back. We shared informally, but we are working up the risk and opportunity presented by further opportunities. So we are not standing still and saying this is good as it can be. And I think that's really important when we submit this plan to Welsh Government. We are signalling, we know that this is not an acceptable position. This is not a position. We are just accepting it within the organisation and that we are committed to going further. It is important we step through it bit by bit, and I think we use the language probably down as well about making sure this is credible. We do need the connection back to real delivery on the ground in terms of taking the money out of the system and making sure we're driving very best value in terms of the expenditure that we are making. And it's important that we take our workforce with us along the journey. Just to give you a flavour of the recovery and sustainability, there was quite a deep dive in terms of some of the workforce issues. And this is one of our drivers. We spend a significant proportion of our funding on our workforce, and there are a lot of areas that we need to go at in terms of presenteeism. We have the highest sickness rate in Wales of any of the health boards. Thinking about how we roster and ensure staff are present and available to work, making sure that we're supporting the well-being of our staff, but also making sure they're on the journey with us about how we change the way that we deliver services and transform what we do. And again, there'll be some conversations that we bring back at key points in the year where there'll be decision points that are flagged and signalled in here, but there'll be specifics that we bring back for decisions. So we've talked about balancing access with where we provide services. We've got 3 acute sites in I can't remember what the diagrams, within 5 miles of one another, Darren, or yeah, there we go. So and that's really helpful to put that into context. You've heard our responsibility in terms of being commissioned to provide tertiary service, specialist services for both the Hywel Dda population, but some of those services across the whole of South Wales and even into England for some of the more specialist things we do. And we've got to get that right. That is getting the balance of that right for our population and what we are required to deliver on behalf of others is also a really important part of the jigsaw puzzle that we have to have in place. So, John, I think in terms of the seriousness, I think the board understand that we are in a really challenging position. We did have a scrutiny session with the chief forest government officials in the department the week last Friday, and I think what I took away from that meeting was a sense that they understand what's driving our underlying deficit position. They might not like it, but they understand what is driving that underlying deficit position, and that they can see our kind of workings in terms of where we've got to at the moment. So very open and transparent about what's driving those costs. Clearly, what they want to do is work along with us to get to the sustainable financial position as quickly as we can, and come alongside us in terms of the choices and challenges and the things that we need to do, both in terms of realising the savings programme, but in terms of some of those other transformation programmes and special programmes of work that we need to deliver as well. And some of these things are capital enabled or digital enabled. And again, that's a real balance for us where we don't have the funding for those things. Again, we've got to step through those things as we progress those plans with Welsh Government. I think the recognition that support would be helpful to us is a really positive one. And thank you, Darren. You've been holding those conversations with Hywel in Welsh Government and with our colleagues in the NHS Executive Financial Delivery Unit. And the sooner we can bring that on board to help us deliver will be really critical. So that's really welcomed as well. John, I'll pause there. I'm happy to take any specific questions on the accountable officer letter because I will be submitting an accountable officer letter, which I will share with board members. And to accompany the plan when it goes in, which needs to be submitted on Monday. Thank you. Abby, thank you very much. There's a lot of really sobering information context there in terms of where the board finds itself. Acknowledging, as Marie did at the start, this has been a very different approach to the whole planning round. There's ownership across the organisation. Everyone is putting so much time and effort to actually move us into a very, very different type of plan. Because of our underlying deficit, though, and the pressures facing us, we can't prove it, although there are a number of features to it that we will obviously be continuing with. So before we move to the recommendations, can I ask any questions, comments, anything anybody wants to add? Andrew, then Andrew.
Yeah, no, just a big thank you to everybody who's been involved in the work, and it was massively absorbing, isn't it, to get through the quantity and the challenge that there is. And I'm just conscious of the balance of realism, which we absolutely want, but also hope. And how can we balance that, particularly for the rest of the workforce? Because a lack of hope can lead to the opposite behaviour that we want to engender to get where we need to be. So it feels to me we need to, and I know this is obvious, so apologies for stating the obvious, but how can we engender that sense of purpose and hope in delivering those targets so that we have more hope of getting them? And I recognise the need to give the truthful message in order that people understand the situation, but also that balance of hope. And along with that is how we describe the current plan, because obviously it's not going to be improvable for obvious reasons, but still people are doing work. So how do we get that message out about what's important to be doing and what is worth doing because it's going to continue, and not that sense of we're going to do this work for 3 months and then we're going to chop it off. So how do we get that through? And apologies for teaching you to what you already know. And just really a little bit of sense as well about there's the 29 schemes that have yet to be quantified. Do we have any idea about what that is like to be? Talk about the hope. I don't know if it is hope enough. And when will we know about those schemes? Because again, there's tendency for these things to drift through the year, and then not to be achievable by the very nature of the time scale. More of a comment than a real question.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you for that comment. It's really important. And I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't think there was hope and optimism in the organisation. And I think colleagues who heard me in the last committee session talked about my reflections of 90 days. I see great people every day doing really great things. And the report in its, by trying to keep it short, we probably don't do justice to all the good things that are going on in the organisation, all the successes and achievements we've achieved this year. And I think we have got an awful lot of opportunity to go at. It's quite hard to get there, and it will require a cultural shift in the organisation, a focus on quality, really sharp focus on quality. We know that quality services actually cost us less. And just thinking about stories that our colleagues presented in terms of, where there are opportunities to improve the patient pathway, make that more streamlined. We have got lots of opportunities across multiple service areas where, because either the length of time it takes or the way that we're interfacing across the pathway, or where patients touch our services, we've got things that we can do to improve that, to make it better for patients, better for staff, better for our bottom line, and actually better for the climate as well in terms of our wider long-term goals. So, and it's a job of the board to instill hope and confidence that we can do those things together. So thank you very much. Darren, in terms of, we are going to need to bring this back every month in terms of the progress we're making, either through the committee structure, IM briefings where we've got the weekly touch points. So you will be kept informed very much in terms of the progress that we're making in terms of those areas, and where we need to bring them back forward to the board for decision, we will do that in a really timely way. But clearly we'll be bringing a response back to the board in May because we will have had the response from Welsh governments in a really timely way. We can expect that.
And obviously, we said that there'd be no hiatus from the 31st of March to the 1st of April. And of course, that's the role of Performance and Finance Committee as well. We'll continue with an enhanced level of scrutiny there. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I recognise this isn't a scrutiny committee and that we've been through some of that. I just want a bit more reassurance, really, having done this for a number of years now. First of all, if I just start by saying, look, I think we're in a really difficult position. We've got rising costs, we've got waiting lists, we've got expectations from Welsh Government, and we've got significant deficit that we are trying to claw back. And I guess, when I reflect on where we've come from, it feels a bit to me like we've had a lot of these discussions each year. So we get the reassurance, and then we've been too over-optimistic in our expectations. We haven't achieved what we've achieved, so therefore we go through the same exercise again. And I guess where I wanted to get to was, why do we think things are going to be different this year? I still think, this is from my point of view, personally, that we're being over-optimistic about what we can achieve going into next year, on the basis that we've got a number of things which we haven't quantified yet what the savings are going to be, and we're moving into April, so we're moving into the new year in the very near future. So I wonder about, when we look about reassurance and assurances for the board, what is different to this year to next year? And I think what would have helped for me, Darren, is a chart which set out the savings that we've had to make or wanted to make over the number of years, the last 5 years, and how closely we've come to some of those. So some sort of trend analysis so that we can actually see, look, we thought we were going to be able to achieve this amount. This is what we actually achieved. Because I think we have struggled for a number of years. And I'll say it again, from my point of view, I think we've, you know, if we're going to do this, then we're going to have to say very clearly to our government that is probably going to have to be a longer time frame for this, and we're going to have to stop doing things, and we've got to come to some agreement about what those things are. So I'll get off my soapbox, Chair, but I just wanted to say that. So I think it's important that we reflect on things like that.
A really, really important point, Andrew, and I think Welsh Government would ask the same questions as well. What is going to be different? And of course, we've also been working on choices to put forward to Welsh Government as well. That very point we make about what are we going to continue with then, in what form. So Darren, do you want to come back in on that? Because you think there is a different approach, and I think it would be helpful to actually spell that out, and we can set that up in the whole government's approach.
So thank you. I recognise the challenges I wrestled with myself, to be fair. So thank you for the comments. I think just on the savings quantums, I just look back over the last 4 years, we have saved 130 million in those 4 years, but only half of that was recurrent. So the learning in there is making those savings. Like we do lots of one-off things, and that potentially can sometimes mask. I think we're not more transparent about the underlying position through this year and the risk we're putting on that. So I'll take up your challenge with something over the last 5 years and bring something that we can have a look at. That's helpful. From an approach perspective, we have a number of things in place now that not been in place before. I think there's a different collective executive ownership of the problem, and that's very positive. And having spoken to Liz and Tina, I think there'll be further enhancement of that as they come in, so that's really welcome. The Recovery and Sustainability Programme has learned a lot in this first 6 months. In the first 6 months, it's effectively highlighted where the drives of the deficit are and where the opportunities are. As we transition into it, we're trying to manage the in-year pressures will now relax in the sense that we spend less time on that because we've got the mechanism in place. We will focus on savings delivery once or twice a month, actually, because every fortnight is twice a month. So the Chief Exec Chair in the Recovery and Sustainability Board, double run. Sorry, I mean, it's not time. It's really important that the Chief Executive is in that to just keep the pace up on this. The support from outside is absolutely critical as well. I'm really enough to know that we can't do everything. I think there are external expertise, views of other organisations, we can bring in as interest will be really helpful as well. And finally, coming back to the exact point is we've got a savings framework which is in the slide deck. It's not in this document, which shows by theme where we believe the opportunities are, and that will be executive led as well as supporting the individual service group leads, because one of the key things that I think you said, Andrew, is if we enter into next year with the same mechanisms we've had for the last 2 years, we'll have the same results. And there's 3 big things about the exec leadership, the recovery and sustainability approach, and the focus on savings through chief exec led lens is really helpful. And I will finally add that we now meet as the Performance and Finance Committee formally once a month, but informally in the month as well, which follows each recovery and sustainability. Like I said, all of that, it isn't easy, so I accept the challenge, but we've got very different mechanisms and ways of working in to help us with the different perspective into next year.
So Andrew, a difficult pathway to signalling what is different.
Yeah, I think, Chair, it's helpful to have that set out in that way, so thanks, Darren.
And of course, we really mustn't underestimate what we have done this year. You know, I think we will hit the 43.7 at the year end. That's a huge achievement for the organisation, really. And I think that signals this whole approach to collective ownership across the piece and people pulling together, recognising the seriousness of it. Thank you. So I've got Helen, then Jean, then Rena. Helen, please come in.
Sorry, I haven't got the paper in front of me because it's not on the internet, but so I did have a meeting with Joanne this week to go through the IMTP, so I'm going through memory, so I apologise. One is I can see your measures, but you haven't got a measure for patient experience down on how you're going to report back on that on your IMTP. And then also, how are you going to make your annual plan IMTP visible to the public in a format that they can understand? And how are you going to report on what you didn't come in on last year and what you did accomplish last year to the public?
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Yeah, really important points. Thank you. We'll make sure it is on the external website so colleagues and anybody can see the document. Helen, taking those 3 points, one of the things this document does is summarises a huge amount of granularity that sits in other plans. And your point about patient experience is a really important one. We have multiple mechanisms through which we receive feedback from patients and mechanisms of understanding what that is telling us in terms of what it feels like to be a patient in our system and how we need to respond to that appropriately. There is a lot of work that sits underneath that. We are strengthening our performance and accountability framework that sits underneath the board in terms of what conversations we have with service groups and patient experience and understanding, again, what the feedback is telling us. And how we use that valuable feedback is an important part of that process. So I'm very happy, Helen, that we can talk to you about in more detail around how we do that. And I know it's a portfolio that's moving from Hazel to Liz Ricks when she arrives in terms of bringing together a range of portfolios that look at the kind of patient experience and what patients are telling us about their experience. The second point has gone out of my head. Accessible. Yes, sorry, accessible. We are going to be choosing a video, Helen. It's a requirement this year, which I think is a really good thing. We're not going to do anything too flashy. We'll do it in-house, but we will make sure there's a really clear narrative for the public to understand what it is that we are aiming to achieve this year from the public's point of view, from patients' point of view, from staff point of view. And setting in the context of the longer term goals that Marie touched upon. We've got 5 clear strategic objectives. We're going to refresh the strategy this year and we will make sure that as we start developing the plan next year, there's really close alignment. So hopefully that will be much more transparent and visible in terms of what this means for the public and how we will report against it. And then what we did there is a section in there, Helen, on the achievements from last year, but of course we report separately on the totality of the annual plan, and when we get to the end of quarter, which is next week, we will do a comprehensive update, and we're very happy to share that. It'll probably come in for information to board because it's slightly out of filter in terms of our time frame. We are required to submit that to Welsh Government, and we'll make sure that that's publicly available and people can see the level of detail as part of that. And then, of course, the AGM is a really important opportunity for us to reflect, to take stock against a whole range of indicators and measures and the work that we've got in our annual plan. And again, that's an important opportunity to be accountable to the public. So I'm sure we'll want to talk to you about how we get maximum benefit from that opportunity that's presented at the AGM. So thank you for those questions. Thank you.
So 3 more contributions, then we'll move to the recommendations. So Jean, Rena, Nicola. Jean.
Most of my questions have been asked, except that for me, what's different this year is we have enhanced visibility of the effort and scrutiny and expected outcomes. Not saying that wasn't there last year, but for me, there's been greater evidence of that this year.
Rena, please come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to come back on what is different too, because I do feel that in previous years, I sense that we lost a bit of momentum once we started the new financial year. And what I think we've emphasised through performance and finance, and obviously it'll come through on the Recovery and Sustainability Board agenda, is that we can't lose momentum. We have to keep this whole thing going. And in particular, with the service groups as well, there's no relaxing period because we're in a different financial year. We are in a difficult financial position. And as long as they recognise that, and we were given assurance at Performance and Finance on Tuesday from the Neath and Talbot and Singleton group that they did recognise that and that they were already, if you like, lining up their savings. And in particular, taking a sort of more strategic approach to looking at what are the real priorities that are going to give us the biggest savings, and to concentrate the effort across on those priorities, which I think will be helpful to us. The other thing about the plan that I'm assured by, and I suppose is a bit different therefore, is that we do have choices in it. There is flexibility in it. And in a way that is important, because as we move forward with this agenda, and we're obviously going to get the external advice in, it may enable us to perhaps take decisions that we wouldn't have thought about now, but that are going to release some savings for us, and are the things that we want to do in the context of our sort of clinical side. So I do think it is different, and I'm given assurance that what we've got in place will be monitoring and making sure that all the mechanisms we are working towards achieving what we're setting out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Really important comments there. Thank you. Nicola.
Mina's covered most of mine, but thank you very much. Just one question. Going into the next financial year, what are we doing, obviously exec level, not just exec level, organisation level, and on to keep an eye on the finances within this year?
There's a lot, which is good. What we haven't perhaps touched on here is we're rebasing budgets, not fundamentally. We're giving money out to quite a different way. And we're allowing service groups flexibility to deploy budgets where their pressures are. So when we get into the accountability discussions, we're expecting break-even because savings will be delivered. So there's a clearer line of sight into the discussion about what the accountability is and be the budget. So that's the foundation that perhaps has been a bit out of date coming into this year. And then what we'll have is, I meet all of them on a monthly basis anyway, and that's with the chief operating officer as well. So it's a more rounded discussion. We're going to have exec-led monthly performance reviews. We're going to move from quarterly. Quarterly is going to be different. There'll be a monthly one with a broader exec discussion about options and choices. We have the recovery and sustainability meeting twice a month, and there are two key sections to that now going into the new year. One is the service groups and the corporate directors to present the safest plans, and then some thematic work as well, so that's double. And then we'll have an escalation process, whereas if then teams start to drift from where we'd expect them to be and can't articulate clear recovery trajectories, then they'll be escalated and further things in terms of support and meetings, and then scrutiny will be brought to bear. So there's quite a lot more. What we need to make sure is that we make those interactions as effective as possible. Bringing people in from wherever they're working, 4 or 5 scrutiny sessions a month, really won't be beneficial. We need to make sure we've got that. But if we need to go, then we will do that and do. So that's the essence of the really different architecture for next year.
Perhaps we can ask PNFC to have a look at that, and the whole thing. How does it work? You know, from board all the way down to individual budget holders, just for assurance purposes, and that will also assure Andrew as well, I think, in terms of what is. So shall we move to recommendations then? We do have 10 set out there. They have been carefully crafted, I know. I would like to suggest adding 2, which is one that the full board places on record its thanks to the members of Performance and Finance Committee under that's chairing. For me, I think this was a masterclass in oversight and scrutiny, and I thank you all on behalf of the full board. Really, it's just you know, if some things can be a delight to then from a chair's perspective, it was a governance delight. Thank you. And I do think we also need to accept Abby's advice as the accountable officer to the organisation when we need to report that formally. So with those 2 additions, are people happy to accept the recommendations? Remember that we're concluding we can't approve this plan. It has to go into Welsh Government for scrutiny and assessment purposes along with Abby's accountable officer letter. We don't as yet know how the Cabinet Secretary will receive it. He will get advice from officials, but I doubt he'll have volunteered. So thank you all very much. And please Marie, Darby, please thank everybody who's contributed to this, because it's been a phenomenal amount of work across the organisation. Thank you. So shall we have a 20-minute break at that point, please? And then we shall resume again at just after 4:00. Well,
So from our point of view, yes.
Yes, that's right.
No, no, yeah. Or whether or not it just got cost. Yeah. But it was go back. So, no, I didn't say that, Jack. I listened to exactly what you said. So, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Item 3B, the key issues report from the Digital Data Research and Innovation Committee. Andrew, in fact, you were doing this particular one as it's January.
I think I've agreed to take it on, yes.
So do you want to talk us through the key issues that you want the board to be alerted to?
Yeah, so this was the January meeting. We've had a further meeting since then, which I'm sure we'll report again. So there are a couple of alerts that were made there, largely around the subject access request risk, which, as we saw earlier on in the meeting, has been heightened because of the risk of not being able to answer within time. But just to reassure the board that since then, at our last meeting, we had a further update, and with the work being completed to some extent on T-Samlet, there is a little bit more capacity to look at this issue and try and see if we can maximise the processes to speed that up. So we're expecting another report on this risk, and hopefully we can lower the risk level as a result of that. Then some of the other issues around records management audit and the findings from that, particularly around the contractual arrangements for various pathology and other records that have been stored. But again, we've had some good updates on that around looking at the contracts, the procurement process, and also looking at the potential for T-Samlet to be an answer to some of that. And as well as that, just to say that we also looked at later on at wider records management within the health board, particularly mental health and community. And so we've asked for a fuller piece of work to be done on that. And so we're expecting at the next committee meeting a bit of a plan of action so that we can address that and see whether we can come up with similar solutions to record management as have been done for the medical records, etc. So we'll be able to update the board and assure or not assure, depending on the plan and how that's looking. And then also clinical coding, we're alerting the board on clinical coding and the issues on recruitment and the backlog of coding. We are also, we've had an update on that, and the team have managed to provide a different solution than the one that had been put in the report, which utilises existing resources to tackle the backlog for the next couple of years. And I believe that's been to management board, etc., been approved. So that looks a good solution, albeit it doesn't solve the problem immediately, but it does give a way forward that is progress. So there's been some good updates, I think, on those alerts that we wanted to bring to the board. And then there was some assurance is around the various work streams within the digital, and again, people can read those. And then also a little bit of advice on the retention of records. But again, that has been picked up by the work in T-Samlet, and again, we're expecting some updates on it to address that issue as well.
Was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, just to provide a couple of updates on that. So on the clinical coding, as well as us committing some of our vacancies to improve the situation, we're also using some of that vacancy money to invest in the AI model on the auto coding. So, and we put together a 3-year increase towards the target plan. It's not ideal, we want to be the targets now, but at least we've got that trajectory cost effectively, cost neutral way then. On records, especially given the work around mental health and the transformation program, we saw that one of the work streams is informatics. Part of that will be a real focus on records management in mental health as well. And I know Central Clinic has had visits from themselves and chair to prioritise that in that work. And then finally, the INPS, that's the in-practice vision system, the GP system that is of concern given it's gone into administration. I can give some positive news on that a preferred buyer has been identified by the administrator. Also, there's a plan B buyer as well if the first doesn't work out, but it's positive at the moment that there is a preferred buyer. And now individual nations are negotiating with the preferred buyer on a deal. So DHEW are leading on that, on our behalf on that.
Any comments, any questions for Andrew or Matt? No? Oh, Matt.
Just a quick question, we could let go of the standing really. I didn't understand why there's such a high level of vacancies on clinical coding, but mainly what the impact of that is.
Right, so that in high vacancies, we've a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is we've lost staff to the higher banded roles that are available across the border. So the more electronic patient records that are being implemented across the border, for example, then coders in Wales are able to do the coding remotely, and they get paid a band 5 in England rather than a band 4 as they do in Wales. So that's really the key reason for that. And I guess the how that manifests itself is how we've got, you know, the targets, the rates against the targets that got reduced and reduced. So we're on about that 60% level, and we should be reaching 95%. So hence the, you know, the high risk on it, and we need to address it.
Well, Marine and Anne-Louise.
Thanks, Matt. How quickly do we, just on that coding issue, how quickly and to what extent do we think AI will help us close that gap in terms of coding capacity and capability?
It's not going to be quick. We will be tackling the easier, you know, the elements of coding that are quite easy to do then, so that we've got, you know, just a few key data items that can be fed through the AI and then coded. What we're going to need to have in place is the auditing of that. So you just can't trust the AI is going to get it right. So there's going to be a period of time of heavy auditing of what codes are being produced, and we'll trust it all the time. The more we use it, the more it's going to learn from itself, and then it'll get into more complicated coding. So it'll teach itself over time, and it'll increase with how many different you know, procedures or diagnosis it can cope with in an automatic sense. But the trajectory is, you know, it's going to take probably 2 years to really advance into higher percentages of what we can tackle. Hence, that, you know, 3-year plan, a lot of the progress is going to be filling the vacancies and doing the work manually whilst we get that AI model in place.
It could be learning from Tom and the math, couldn't it? Because they've done it.
Yes, so we're working closely with them. They haven't gone for an AI model. They've gone for a model that doesn't do it itself. It's a hard-coded, programmatic sense. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. It wants our model. I think they'll move to that eventually as well. So it's something we need to.
There could be a hybrid option for us potentially.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Anne-Louise.
Thank you. It is on the same point. I just wonder how much productivity is affected by not having coders being able to update systems or change systems, and the opportunities that are lost as a result. And what benchmarking against other organisations, either here in Wales or elsewhere, can we have? I mean, is recruitment of coders the same across Wales because there are opportunities to earn more money? And if that's the case, what can be done about it? Why can't we move it?
So the plan A, direction of travel on that one, is that with the introduction of the autocoder, then your coders become auditors, and therefore against the workforce framework, there's a natural progression to a band 5 from the band 4. That's what CONTAF have done. So as well as introducing that better automated way of doing things, their coders have had to become auditors, and therefore they've regraded them to band 5. So a secondary benefit is their recruitment and retention should be in a much better space. That's our plan. That's what we're planning to do.
Are there any drawbacks to that?
No, other than it, you know, it's not a fixed tomorrow, get to your 95% target immediately, but I don't think there is a way for us to get to that, because coders take 2 years to train as well.
Richard, who's here?
Yeah, so a point, comment really linked to what James was saying earlier on in the board meeting, and that is, the value of coding is in the granular level of detail that's associated with it. And clearly, while most of the clinical detail that's of relevance is handwritten in medical notes rather than on systems, then we're duplicating and triplicating the number of inputs that we're doing. So pulling that information across that better informs commissioning and the costs of treatment and pathways, that this interconnectedness of how we would want to use that information, those data, and turn it into information. It also applies to coding, and I think, Matt, it's fair to say that is part of one of the reasons why NHS England has got attracting so many coders. It's because they've now got the electronic systems that are being implemented everywhere, that they're now putting the additional coders are being put in place to get that information out to them, which is now held centrally rather than in disparate locations.
I'm going to ask the committee to really keep a close eye on this in the case with which this develops. But Sarah Ackley is with us online from Older Wales. Sarah, would you like to comment on this particular item?
Yes, if I can, Chair, just to respond to one of the independent members' comments. We know that coding is an issue across Wales and that the issues that this health board is facing is present in others. I know that DHGW, that this issue is on their radar, and there is some work ongoing at the minute with them in terms of trying to identify some of the issues and put in place some work. So, there is that work happening at a national level as well, and it is recognised, and there is benchmarking across NHS Wales in relation to this. So just to provide a bit of further assurance there in terms of what was happening at a more national level.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And clearly the committee will take that into account in addition to all the comments that Annalise, Richard and others have raised around this. So Andrew, can we ask you if you keep this on your agenda for every committee meeting so we can follow through? And we've considered the alerts you've raised with us, the actions underway, and we're taking assurance from this assurance work is done at committee. But James and Catherine, be very patient. We have finally got to the digital strategy item. So, but please just bear in mind this strategy is going to develop for some time. It's being considered at committee level, different committee levels for some time. So we are taking it as read. Okay, so we're not going through the strategy in that sense in detail because it's been around the board. So Matt, with that caveat, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So members have been presented with a comprehensive digital strategy. I trust and thank you for all taking the time to read it, and thank you to committee members as well who've helped us get it to the point that it's at. We really hope we can support the direction of travel for the digital strategy this afternoon, because as we know, digital ways of working are becoming increasingly essential to delivering high quality care and a sustainable NHS. If we don't keep pace, our patients are going to have poorer outcomes compared with those organisations that are more digitally mature, and there's evidence out there of that, where those mature organisations, their patients having better experience, better patient safety, lower adverse events, and impact on operations as well, like reduced length of stay. So it's really important. Our strategy is not for digital for the sake of digital. It's aligned to the strategic objectives of the organisation and the core business needs across all settings and services. And we're not starting from scratch either. I think we've got a good reputation in Swansea Bay for delivery of digital services, and I think we are held as one of the better examples across Wales currently. Our vision is to improve the health and well-being of the population of Swansea Bay by harnessing the power of digital technology and digital transformation. Two important terms there, because whilst the technology is critical, and we absolutely need to get that right, along with the data that we capture through that. And at the core of what we set out in the strategy is the need for an electronic patient record to rationalise the number of systems that we have currently, the duplication of effort that our staff have to make. And we've heard from our digital clinical colleagues earlier on the trouble that causes and the lost time that causes across the organisation. So we're prioritising for year one, the building of a case to take the electronic patient record forward, to focus on the unscheduled care space in the first instance. And the other key priority for me to raise at this point is in the integrated care space, where we absolutely need a better information service to support mental health community and across the social services. And we've got plans away to get the first phase of that moving as well, and good conversations with Andrew this week on how we work better with Nico Talbot on their experience of the system they're using so far, because we'll be using the system that the same supplier owns, and there's some real opportunities of working with Nico Talbot and Swansea. From a data and intelligence perspective, we have our strategic plan for business intelligence that has been developed and is currently being socialized across with colleagues across the organization, and we will be bringing that through to committee over the coming couple of months. It majors on predictive analysis and artificial intelligence, and of course we know what the huge opportunities are of artificial intelligence for both clinical processes and reducing our administrative effort. Just to say, you know, we're already working closely with the organisation. 129 managers and clinicians have already been through our data literacy training programme, and we are planning the expansion of Microsoft Copilot to help with that administrative burden that we have as well. And then finally, back to that vision, the digital transformation element of it. Well, arguably the hardest part of it is how we engage with the workforce, how we bring